Back when I was younger, I worked at a clothing store for a few years. I had one other job in retail before this, but it didn't last that long as it was only over a summer. So this clothing store was pretty large and popular, and there were many different areas inside of it. When I first got the job, I was working in the back half of the store most of the time in that department. I would do all kinds of tasks, organizing, bringing out more inventory from the back, and things like that. I never worked as a cashier, which I was happy about because I didn't like that. So one night when I was still pretty new to the job, I was working and it was later at night. Things were really quiet and we closed in about an hour or two. It was a nice time for me because the store would be nearly empty so I could get lots of stuff done. When it was busier, I would always have to look out for customers to not get in their way and sometimes help them as well. As I was working back there, I saw a man walk into that section. I remember that he was kind of looking around at clothes, but it seemed more like he was just kind of looking around in general. Now, I wasn't staring at him or trying to just watch him, but he was in my line of vision as I worked. I was kind of shy back then, and that is why I didn't like to be a cashier. So I didn't have the thought to go up to the guy and ask if he needed help. But I remember that he was just kind of standing around for at least 10 minutes. He didn't move much, and was not necessarily looking at clothes, but just kind of observing the area. Eventually, though, the man turned and walked away. I really thought nothing of it, and maybe it was nothing. But anyways, I continued to work. There were not a lot of others working that night. It was probably me and about 5 other people in that moment. I was really the only person in that particular area. Maybe 15 minutes later, I went into the back room area over there. Like many stores, we had a backroom area with extra inventory where it would be before it hit the sales floor. It was cluttered back there with boxes, shelves, and all kinds of stuff. There were also a few doors that led to outside spaced out here and there. I remember that I went back there to get something, and when I was in the back room, I heard somebody knocking at one of the doors from outside. They were practically banging on the door. This was really weird because that door was rarely, if ever, used. I don't think it was an emergency door, but it just led to this back street behind the store. It was never used other than for deliveries. It was a small access road, and behind it was really nothing else. There was another door a ways down where deliveries would come in. I thought that it had to be either a coworker who for some reason went outside and got locked out, or else we were getting a delivery, and the person just went to the wrong door for some reason. But both of those scenarios seemed unlikely to me. I was the only person in the back at that moment, and whoever was outside the door was relentlessly banging on it. I thought about going to answer it, but still being new to the job and stuff, I decided to find a coworker first. So instead of opening the door, I walked out of the back room and back onto the sales floor again. I walked around until I found a coworker. When I did, I told her about the banging on the door. She had no idea who it would be, and like me, did not think that we were getting any kind of a delivery. She suggested that we go outside from the front and go around to see who was there. I agreed to it. The store was very quiet, with basically nobody there, so we didn't have a ton to do in the moment. We left the store through the front and then started walking around the building. Behind the building, like I said, was just a narrow sort of alleyway that was only really used for deliveries, and behind that was sort of a wall going up, and then above that was a back area to another store nearby. So when we approached the back, it was very quiet there. I could hear the person when we got closer. When we finally got to the end of the building, we both looked around the corner. Then we saw a dark SUV that was parked near the door. Very quickly, we saw a man run from the door area, jump inside the car, and it drove off in the other direction, leaving very quickly. It seemed really suspicious to both of us. I didn't get a great look at the man at all, but he looked like the guy who had been in the store before, just looking around. My coworker and I both went back inside the store and reported it to our manager. I'm not sure if anything was done, because I went home shortly after and then was off for the night. I never heard anything more about it. Looking back, I'm really glad that I didn't open that door. I think that possibly the man was going to try to rob the store or something like that. One time, a long time ago, I was shopping at a department store. This was way back, probably close to 30 years ago now. I lived in a city that had a nearby shopping area that was pretty popular. There were lots of stores, and many of them had connecting parking lots. That area had very many stores and restaurants, and I would do like 90% of my shopping there. On this night, it was late, and I had gone to this store many times before. It was large, and when I went in there on this night, I was there for over an hour. It was nearly closing time when I left. So I got out to the parking lot and walked to my car. I put everything in my car and then got inside. By that time, I remember that the parking lot was basically empty, but when I had gotten there, there were way more cars, so I was parked kind of far from the store. Before I left, I looked around and noticed this guy walking in the parking lot. I had no idea where he had come from, but he seemed to kind of emerge from nowhere. There was a massive parking lot because there were a lot of stores close by, and it was practically empty, except for this guy walking in it. The guy was sort of in front of my car, but maybe about 100 feet away. Before leaving, for some reason, I just watched him walk. The guy went to about directly in front of my car, but still like 100 feet away. Then he stopped and faced me. The guy just looked at me and was standing there. It seemed really weird now. I remember that he had sort of long hair and a mustache and was wearing just average clothes. He just stood there looking at me, and for some reason I didn't drive away. I think I was just really curious as to what he was doing. He didn't wave or say anything, and I didn't recognize him. He continued to stand there and face me for like a minute. The guy didn't move or anything, and I was really weirded out by this point, so I just left. I went home and forgot about it. However, sometime later, maybe a week or two, I was shopping at that store again. I remember that I got up to the checkouts to buy what I was getting. There were a few lanes open, and as I was in line, I noticed one of the cashiers. I recognized him and at first didn't know what from. Then it clicked. It was the same guy that I had seen standing in the parking lot and staring at me. I did not know that he worked at the store. This made it seem even more creepy. What he did was so weird, but I guess it made sense as to why he was in the parking lot if he worked there. He hadn't been wearing the store uniform when I had seen him before, though. I was not in that guy's line, thankfully, and I checked out in a different one. Soon after, I left. Fast forward to about a month later. I was talking with one of my neighbors, and I found out that she worked at that same store. I had never seen her there, but she was part-time and was not a cashier. Anyways, when I found out she worked there, I remembered the creepy guy. I asked her if she knew him and described him to her, but didn't tell her about my experience yet. As soon as I mentioned him, she knew exactly who I was talking about. She said that he was creepy and he had been fired from the store. She said that he was always weird to other employees and had tried to follow somebody home once. When I heard that, it made more sense. I told her about seeing him in the parking lot, and she said that he was really weird like that. But it still seemed so creepy. The guy was literally just standing there in the middle of the parking lot staring at me, and it was right in front of his place of work. I wonder if he had seen me in the store before or something, or if it was more of a random thing. This is something that happened just last year. I work at a very large and popular mall. It has hundreds of stores in it, and we get countless shoppers each year. On weekends around the holidays, it's even more busy. Particularly the weekends leading up to Christmas, it can be chaos at times. The store that I work at is a shoe store, and we sell a few other products as well. It's fairly popular though, so we're just as busy as any store when the mall is crowded. In fact, at times we had to limit the amount of people that can enter the store at once, because our space is not very large. One weekend last year, I was working along with 4 other coworkers. On a normal day, there might be 2 of us working at once, but we knew that it was going to be busy. As I was working on this very busy day, things got really hectic. The store was packed, everybody was looking at shoes and buying them, and all of us employees were kept busy. There were constantly questions about products, and people were everywhere. This went on for hours. At one point, a man came up to me and asked if we had a shoe in a certain size. I knew that we had going into the day and told him yes. The guy seemed kind of frustrated already. He had been looking for the shoe and he couldn't find any of the shoes that he wanted in the store, but I knew that we kept some in the back. Well, it turned out that I was wrong. We had some when the day started, but they all sold, and I didn't know that. Now we were completely out. So I went into the back room and realized that they were all gone. I went back out and told the guy that we actually just sold out of them. This man got way more angry than I was expecting. He instantly started cursing at me and saying that I was a liar and stuff. I apologized and offered to give him some other stores that they might be at, but the guy said no. He continued to yell at me, and some of the people nearby started to notice. The store was still packed, and when the guy wouldn't stop yelling at me, this other guy who was nearby stepped between us. After that, the angry guy seemed to calm down a little bit. But then he said to me that he would be back and he would get me, whatever that meant. Then he turned and left. I just thought that it was an empty threat. The man was gone now, and I felt better. I went back to work, and we stayed extremely busy. The store was messed up from stuff being out of place, and there were customers everywhere. So it was a constant work of us trying to reorganize the store, help customers, and things like that. By 6 o'clock, things finally started to calm down. We closed at 8, and the last 2 hours were much calmer. Finally, by 7:30, all the other employees left except for me and 2 others. Us 3 were working until close. Each of us knew how to close the store. The mall closed at 8 as well as our store, so by now the entire mall was pretty quiet. When several of us would work until close, we would kind of switch off at who would stay last and finish up the closing tasks. On this night, it was my turn too. At 8 o'clock, the 2 others left, and I stayed to finish things. I would be there only about another 15 minutes or so. As I finished things up, a while later, I saw out the front window of the store the same man from earlier. He was already looking at me. Our store was closed now, and the doors were locked. The mall was also now closed. Everybody was supposed to leave, but there were still a few people lingering in the hallways. The guy was standing in front of the store and just staring at me. This made me nervous. He said that he would be back, and now he was. And I was alone in the store. He couldn't get in, but I was leaving soon. What was this guy going to do? I stayed in there and finished up, and went out of the guy's sight for a while. When I was done and wanted to leave, I saw that he was still there. So I didn't leave yet. I was afraid that if I did, he would do something or follow me out to my car. I didn't know. Now, this guy was basically the only person out in the hallways. I didn't leave and instead went back into the back area of the store out of his sight. I came back a minute or so later to see if he was still there, and he was. But then I saw a security guard approach him and tell him that he had to leave. Within moments, the guy was walking away with the security guard basically kicking him out of the mall. I was so glad to see that. I waited inside still for another couple minutes, and then I left and headed home. I walked through the now empty mall and then left to go into the parking garage. That's where I typically parked. The garage was practically empty now as well, with only a few cars scattered around here and there. I made my way to my vehicle, but before I got there, I heard a voice from sort of behind me. I looked and saw the same guy. He was standing a ways away in the parking lot. I have no idea how he knew I would be there or if it was just a coincidence, but nevertheless, he was here. I saw him start to angrily walk towards me. I turned and just started running for my car. I sprinted until I got there and then quickly went inside. Then I did not waste a second and locked the doors, started my car, and left. The man did not reach me yet. I left him standing there in the parking garage and I drove home. After that, I never saw him again. I was kind of paranoid that he was going to show up sometime at the store. Thankfully, he never did, at least not when I was working. I can't believe that he got so mad about that. It was an honest mistake, and I was just trying to help the guy. Some people have anger problems, though. For a couple of years, I used to live in this one apartment building. For some background, I am a woman and was in my mid-20s at the time, though I often get mistaken for looking much younger. This place was pretty average, but it was less than a mile from a shopping area with stores and stuff. In fact, it was only like a 5 to 10 minute walk to several different stores. So from time to time, I would walk to the grocery store. I had a car, but it was such a short ways that sometimes I would just walk. There were sidewalks the whole way there, and it was easy to go. So one night, I decided to walk from my apartment to the grocery store. It was already kind of late, maybe 9 p.m. or so. I walked there without a problem, and when I got to the store, it was very quiet. I didn't need to get that much stuff either. Usually if I needed to get a lot, I would also drive my car because then I didn't have to carry a bunch of stuff home walking. So I didn't spend too much time in the grocery store. My time in there was pretty normal and uneventful. I checked out and then left the store and began walking through the parking lot. When I was almost out of the parking lot to get back onto the sidewalk, I saw this car driving through the spaces sort of in front of me. I just assumed that it was an average car leaving. But then the car slowed down and started driving closer to me. Soon the car stopped. I had to now walk past it and kind of in front of it. I didn't really know what was going on, but I kept walking. When I got fairly close, I saw the driver's window roll down to reveal a man behind the wheel of the car. He was looking at me and then said hi. I said hi back, and then he asked me if I needed a ride. I smiled and told him no thanks, I was fine. Then he said that he saw that I walked there and it was cold out. This seemed kind of weird because how did he know that I had walked there? I said that I was fine and it wasn't that long of a walk. Now, I had never seen this guy before, and I thought that maybe he was just trying to look out for me and was just guessing that I had walked. But still, I didn't need a ride. I started to walk away, and then he asked me if I lived in the apartment complex that I lived at. I didn't know how he would know this. I stopped and said yes for some reason. I then asked him if he lived there too. I thought that was the only explanation, but the guy said no. At that point, I told him to have a good night and I started to walk away. The man asked one more time if I was sure I didn't need a ride, and I said yes. Then I walked off and got onto the sidewalk. He kind of creeped me out with what he said and stuff, so I started walking back on the sidewalks. I watched the car leave the parking lot and go onto the street. I remember that as I was walking, the car came up and passed me. I was glad to see it go. I walked the rest of the way back to my apartment and arrived about 10 minutes later or so. When I got to the front parking lot, I saw one car that was sitting in a space with the engine running. It was the same car that the man was driving who asked to give me a ride. The guy had told me that he didn't live there. I didn't know what he was doing, but I had my suspicions. So as soon as I saw him, I started running for the door and did not look back. When I was running along the sidewalk, I heard the door to a car open behind me. I assumed that it was the same guy. I didn't stop though. I didn't hear him say anything, but I did hear footsteps. Still, I continued without looking or anything. I made it to the door, quickly used my key to get in, and then went through the lobby and to the stairs. I walked up to my floor, and the man did not make it inside the building. Then I went home to my place and never saw the guy again. He didn't live at our apartment, so what was he doing there? I'm really glad that I did not accept his offer of giving me a ride home. Who knows what could have happened, or if he was really going to take me home. I used to work as a security guard in a mall years ago. I would often work overnights, which was honestly very easy. Really, I would just walk around the mall, make sure that everything was in order, and then I had a small office as well. The one thing that was creepy was that I would be all by myself for most of the overnight hours, and most of the mall lights would be off. Anytime you have a huge space like that to yourself in the middle of the night, it feels kind of weird. In the office, I had views of all the different security cameras. They did not cover 100% of the mall hallways, but most of them. During business hours, there would be multiple security guards working, but overnight they only needed one. The mall really wasn't that big. It was just one level, but did have a good amount of stores and many different hallways. Every 2 hours, I would get up and walk each hallway and look out of a few entrance doors into the parking lot. I was just making sure that things were fine. Sometimes I would take some notes if I saw unknown cars in the parking lot or something. Obviously also if I saw anything suspicious as well. But other than that, I would just sit at the desk, look at cameras, and really just play around on my phone. It was overall a pretty easy job, because I didn't really have to do any work, to be honest. It was more about just being there. And if anything did happen, all I could really do was call the cops and report it to the mall management, because I didn't have a gun, and I obviously was not a real cop, and I didn't have any power to arrest people or anything. I was hoping that nothing would ever happen, and nothing ever did, until one night. To that point, I had been working at the mall for probably almost 6 months. In that time period, the craziest thing that had happened was one car parked in the parking lot all night that wasn't supposed to be there. That was it. So on this night, I was only a few hours into my shift. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and I got up to make my rounds. I started walking around the mall and got to a hallway leading to some of the doors. When I turned the corner, I saw about 2 or 3 guys approaching the doors. I had never seen something like this before. I assumed that it was some people who didn't know that the mall was closed already, even though it was 11 o'clock at night and literally no cars were in the parking lot. I heard them try to open the doors, and even though I didn't want to, I continued down the hallway towards them. I saw that there were at least 3 of them now, maybe 4. When I got a little bit closer, I saw them quickly turn and start running away. This I found suspicious. If they were just seeing if the mall was open, why would they run? Maybe they saw me and ran. Maybe they were up to no good. That's what I was thinking, but I was hoping that it wasn't true, and I was hoping that they were just gone. I walked to those doors and looked outside. I didn't see the guys anymore, and I didn't see a car in the parking lot either, so I was not sure as to where they had come from. I continued with my rounds, going to another hallway. For the next few minutes, things were fine. Then as I was walking, I heard the sound of glass breaking off in the distance. It was coming from the other end of the mall. I knew instantly that somebody had broken in, and I was really nervous. I took out my phone and dialed 911 to report the break-in. Then I headed over to investigate, even though I didn't want to. Whoever had broken in was a long ways away, but when I got a little closer, I heard multiple men's voices talking to each other. I couldn't make out much of what they were saying. I stopped and no longer wanted to approach them. I realized that these were likely the guys who I had seen in the parking lot. I quickly stopped and turned around, but then the guys heard me. One guy yelled really loud that he knew I was there and for me to show myself. I didn't want to. Instead, I ran for a completely different hallway nearby. I was pretty far from any of the exits, and I didn't think I could make it there before the men would reach me. Then I heard footsteps of the guys starting to come after me. I quickly found a sort of back hallway area in the mall for employees only. I went back there and jumped into a storage closet to hide. I was in a good spot, but theoretically the guys would still be able to get there as you did not need a key. I tried to be as quiet as I could. Within minutes, I heard footsteps of the guy out in the hallway nearby. I was really nervous. Eventually, though, he walked away. I stayed where I was. I didn't hear anything for a long time. Probably 10 minutes later, the cops arrived. The next thing I heard was footsteps of a police officer, and I came out from my hiding place. The cops ended up finding the guys on the other side of the mall. They were arrested for breaking in, and they also broke into one of the stores in the mall. After that, I quit. I didn't want to deal with something like that again. It was one of the scariest experiences of my life. A couple of years ago, I was at home by myself one night. It had been a long day of work, and I was happy to be back home. I lived in a smaller house that I was renting, which I moved to because of my work. On this night, I ordered a pizza online and was going to have it delivered. A while later, the doorbell rang, and I knew that was the pizza. So I went to the front door and I opened it. A man was standing there with the pizza, and I took it from him and gave him his tip. Before I closed the door, though, the man asked me if he could come inside and use my restroom. Now, I really don't know why, but I said yes. I didn't want to say yes. I didn't want the guy in my house because I didn't know him at all. And obviously, I should not have let him. I don't really have an excuse or an explanation, but I guess it was just a reaction to say yes, so I did. The guy didn't immediately come across as strange or anything, so I told him that it was just down the hall and to the left. The house was not that big, and it was pretty easy to figure out where everything was. So the guy went down the hall and into the bathroom. I was slightly nervous because I didn't know him at all, but less than a minute later, he left the bathroom and then walked back to the front door. Then he left. After that, I was able to have my pizza. However, hours later, I was still up. I was just relaxing in the living room, and it was probably around midnight. Suddenly, there was a knock on my front door. I didn't know who it could possibly be at this hour. I walked over to the door and looked through the window. It was the pizza delivery guy from earlier, but he was not in his pizza uniform anymore. When I looked at him through the window, he saw me. After seeing that he noticed me, I felt like I had to answer. So I opened up the door and was really curious to see why he was here. The guy told me that he had just gotten off of work, and he realized that he dropped his wallet in my house. When he said this, instantly I was suspicious. He asked if he could come inside and look for it. Now, I had been inside for a few hours and didn't see a wallet. Plus, I had been to the bathroom and never saw it there either. I was sure that I would have. I told the man that I didn't think it was here, but I could quick look for him. He said no, he knew where it was, and he knew that it was here. So I started to ask him where it was, but he then just walked right into my house. He said he would just be a second. The man blew past me and went towards the hallway. Then I watched him enter the hallway, but instead of going to the bathroom, he went into my bedroom, which was directly across from it. He then closed the door and I heard it lock. I started to walk over there and I said that was not the bathroom, but he didn't answer me. By now, I had a really bad feeling about this. I had no idea what was going on or what he was doing. I called out to him several more times, but he said nothing in response. After a few more minutes of me being very confused, I decided to call the police. I dialed 911 and told them of the exact situation. Then I waited. I went near the front door of the house and did not want to go near my bedroom. The entire time, the man stayed there and I didn't hear him at all. The police were pretty quick to arrive and I met them outside. Then they entered my house. Sometime later, they came out with the man. He had been found hiding in my bedroom and was refusing to leave. I'm glad that I called the police on him. I really don't know what exactly he was doing. I'm sure that he probably got fired from the pizza place after that as well, but I still haven't ordered from there since. A couple of years ago, my phone broke. It had been pretty old, and I was sort of meaning to get a new one. But after breaking, I had to find a new one fast. I thought about going to the store or looking online. But to try to save some money, I went on Facebook Marketplace. I also wanted to get one as fast as possible. I had heard there were a lot of good cell phones there for cheap. After maybe 30 minutes of looking, I found one. It was the same phone that I had before, but a few generations newer. The price also seemed very cheap compared to what it would be elsewhere. So at that point, I decided to send the seller a message saying that I wanted to buy the phone. Now, the seller's Facebook account was pretty mysterious. Their name was just JM. I clicked on their profile, and they did not have a profile picture. There wasn't much information about them either. Still, I didn't think that was too big of a deal, and I contacted them. It did not take long before I heard back. The seller, Jay, I guess, told me that I could buy the phone as soon as that night, and I agreed. I suggested that we meet at a local shopping center. However, Jay said they could not do that because they had kids and could not leave their house. Instead, I was supposed to come over that night. I said okay, and I agreed to it. I understood that people with kids probably wouldn't be able to just go whenever. So I was given an address, and that night I drove to it. It took maybe 15 minutes to get there. It was a little bit far away in an area that I had never been before. When I got to the address, I saw that it was a house that looked slightly run down, and there didn't appear to be any lights on inside. The whole neighborhood looked a little bit run down, and the houses had fairly large properties. I had no way of texting the seller that I was there because of my phone being broken, but I had my watch, and I was right on time for when we agreed. So I walked up to the front step and rang the doorbell. After maybe 30 seconds, the door started to open. There were two doors, a screen door and then an actual one. The inside door opened just a few inches, and I saw a woman was standing behind it. She told me to go around to the back and then close the door. So I walked around to behind the house and then entered a back door there. This led into a dimly lit kitchen area. The woman was there inside and sitting at a table. I entered and then sat down across from her. It appeared as though every light in the rest of the house was off. We both just sat there in awkward silence for a few moments. Then I mentioned the phone, saying I would like to buy it. The woman said that she would go and get the phone and got up. I kept sitting at the table. She left the room and I waited at the table. The whole thing so far had seemed really strange. As I looked around, I saw no signs of her having kids. So I waited at the table for at least a good 5 minutes. I didn't know what was taking so long. Did she lose the phone or something? I decided to ask. I called out asking if she was okay, and she called back from the other room saying yes, and it would just be a moment. So I kept sitting there, but then at least 5 more minutes went by. I was starting to feel nervous. It was just really strange. When she left the room, she didn't turn any other lights on either. I could barely see around the kitchen as it was. Eventually, I got impatient and I stood up. I walked to the end of the kitchen and to the entrance of what appeared to be the living room. There was no sign of the woman. I called out again, asking what was taking so long. This time, though, I got no response. I kept standing there looking into the living room, and there was a hallway at the end of it. It was really dark, like I said, but after standing there for like a minute, I thought I saw the woman cross the hallway. She did not bother to say anything or acknowledge me. This was really weird. I walked back into the kitchen. I thought about things, and then I decided to just leave. This whole situation was creeping me out, and I didn't know what was going on. So I walked over to the back door, left, and then walked back out to my car. When I did, I looked back at the house. I saw now that one of the lights was on in a front window which hadn't been before. The woman was looking out of that window and staring at me from inside. It just really creeped me out. I got back inside of my car and drove home. After that, I went and bought a cell phone from the store. Back in the day, I used to go on Omegle from time to time. Omegle recently shut down, and when I heard about it, I was reminded of my own crazy experience. If anybody doesn't know, Omegle was a video chat website. You would use a webcam and would be randomly paired with a stranger. You could chat live on video, or you could just chat by typing as well. And you could skip the person whenever you wanted, and then it would find somebody else. From time to time back when I was in high school and was bored, I would go on there. One time, I was just hanging out in my bedroom. As it got later at night and I was not tired, I just randomly decided to go on Omegle. When I first got on, I don't remember the exact people that I saw, but it was pretty typical. Most of them, either I skipped or they skipped me within the first 10 seconds. Then, about 5 minutes in, I was paired with this one guy. Right away, he looked really strange and also creepy, which caused me to not skip him just because it was fascinating. The guy was in a mostly dark room, and his eyes were very wide. He had a very strange hairstyle as well, and he was just staring at the screen very intensely. I figured he was just messing around trying to look as creepy as he could as a joke. It certainly worked. After he just stared at me on the screen for a while though, I finally said hi. The guy asked who I was, and I just said my first name. He definitely seemed off, and it was really weird. He remained staring at me the entire time, and he spoke in a very monotone way. I thought about skipping him, but I was also interested to see what else he would say. I asked him his name, but he did not tell me. He just asked me where I lived, but I didn't tell him that. Then he just stared at the screen and didn't take his eyes off me for a really long time. I asked him a couple of questions, but he completely ignored them. So at that point, I finally decided to skip him. He was just a little bit too weird. I matched up with some other random person. Then it was more of the same, mostly skipping or getting skipped pretty early on. I had a few short conversations with people that weren't bad. About 15 minutes later though, I was paired with the one creepy guy again. It's extremely rare to see the same person twice on Omegle, or at least it had been in my experience. When I saw him again, I didn't skip him because I was shocked that he was there. He was doing the same thing of just staring at me and not really moving much. I tried talking to him again, but he didn't answer me. So then I skipped him again. About 5 minutes later though, I saw him yet again. I was really creeped out now. I asked him why I kept seeing him. He finally spoke, just saying my name. I had forgotten that I told him earlier in the moment, so I got really freaked out. Then the guy said that I could not get away from him. I was so spooked at that point that I closed out of Omegle altogether. I went on Facebook or something for a few minutes after that. But after a while longer, I wasn't really scared anymore, so I went back onto Omegle. When I got there, I matched with some random guy and I quickly skipped him. Then, for yet another time, I was matched with the creepy guy. He looked exactly the same. He was still staring intensely right at me. When he saw me, he said my name again, and he said that I would not get away from him. Then he just started staring at me. I lost it, and I quickly closed Omegle again. Then I turned off my computer altogether and unplugged it from the wall. I sat there trying to figure out what on earth had just happened and how I kept matching with this guy. I was afraid that he had somehow hacked my computer or something. After a little while though, I soon plugged the computer back in and turned it on. However, I did not go back on Omegle, and I never went on Omegle again. I still wonder about that sometimes. It would say on Omegle how many people were currently online, and it was always like in the thousands, so I just can't believe that I kept matching with this one guy. I'm glad that I never saw him again. For a while when I was younger, I had a roommate. We shared a small 2-bedroom house together just outside the city. I didn't know the guy until I moved in, but I didn't have any money and I needed a roommate to afford renting the house, so that was the only reason that I lived with him. We both paid half the rent of the house, and the place was not very nice and pretty cheap. The guy's name was Ben. When we first moved in, we seemed to get along decently. For the first few days, we mostly just stayed in our own rooms or were gone at work. I did run into him in the kitchen once and we talked briefly. He seemed alright. However, about a week or two into living there, and one night I was awoken to the sound of somebody banging on my bedroom door. It was loud enough to wake me, and it continued, so I called out asking who was there. I figured that it had to be Ben, because who else would be in our house? The knocking stopped at that point, but nobody responded to me. So I got up and I walked over to the door, but when I opened it, nobody was there. I looked down the hallway and Ben's door was shut. I figured he had done it, but I didn't know why. Maybe it was a prank. He just didn't seem like the type of guy to pull that kind of a prank though. I went back to bed at that point. When I got up, Ben had already left for his job, and I forgot to talk to him about it anyways. But the next night, basically the same thing happened again. I once more was awoken in the wee hours of the morning to a banging on my bedroom door. This time I was more frustrated, and I called out, "What?" The knocking stopped, and I got up and ran to the door and opened it. When I got there, nobody was in the hallway again, but I looked and saw Ryan's door closing. I went over and knocked on the door, but he didn't answer. I asked what his deal was, but he still said nothing. I thought about barging into the room and giving him a piece of my mind, but I decided not to. I just walked back to my room and returned to sleep. Maybe Ryan was a sleepwalker and that was the explanation. Although sleepwalkers don't generally act that way as far as I'm aware. They're not called sleep pranksters. So the next morning, I wanted to confront Ben, but once more he was gone when I woke up. That night, again, I was awoken to a knocking. This time, I got right out of bed and marched over to the door and opened it. When I did, Ryan was standing right there on the other side. He looked at me, and I asked him what his problem was. Ryan then shoved me backwards before running off to his room. I went after him and tried opening his door, but it was locked. I banged on it for a while, but he didn't answer. So then I just went back to bed again. I was planning on finding a way to move out as soon as possible. The next morning, Ben was not gone yet. When he left his room shortly after I got up, I confronted him. I asked him what on earth he was doing. Ryan said flat out that he didn't like me and he didn't want to live with me. I told him that I was going to move out as soon as humanly possible. Within a few days, I had found an apartment and moved there, which was good because I didn't like living in that house anyways. The apartment was more comfortable. In the meantime, Ryan did not bang on my door at all for the last few nights that I lived there. Looking back, Ryan was definitely a strange guy. I'm not sure if he was trying to scare me out of living there or what. He could have just told me that he wanted me to move out and we could have handled it like men. There was no reason for the crazy nonsense that he did. I'm glad that I found an apartment so quick. I'm a female, and this took place one night about 20 years ago. At this time, my daughter was just 5 years old. One night, I left home to do some shopping. I was getting groceries and then was going to get my daughter a birthday present. She would be turning 6 in a few days. She stayed at home with my husband and I went by myself. So I got to the Toys R Us and it was sometime at night. I don't remember exactly when, but after going inside, things were very quiet and I think that they must have been closing soon. I knew one thing that I wanted to get for my daughter, but I was kind of looking around for something else as well. I don't even remember what toys they were. Probably some kind of stuffed animals or something else related to animals. After being there a little while, as I was standing in this one aisle by myself, I looked over and noticed this guy at the end of the aisle. It was a man who was wearing a large black coat and also wearing a hat. He was just kind of standing there and seemingly looking at me. Immediately, it struck me as suspicious. I'm not a paranoid person at all, but this just seemed really odd. I didn't really look at him and pretended not to notice, but I could see out of the corner of my eye him still just kind of standing there. After a little while, I looked over again. few seconds after looking at him, he walked away. I didn't know what that was all about, so I moved on and was shopping for probably about 15 more minutes. I didn't see the man during this time. I then checked out and left the store. The parking lot was dark and quiet, and I made my way to my vehicle. But it didn't take me long to notice that there was a car parked right next to mine. It was an SUV, I believe a Suburban, and it was dark gray in color. Maybe it was because of the man staring at me in the store, but this also gave me a bad feeling. It seemed to be parked unnecessarily close to my car, especially with so many open spaces around. But I kept walking towards my vehicle. I then heard one of the SUV doors open, and sort of saw it, but it was at the side farthest away from me. I thought about stopping, but I told myself to just keep going and ignore it. However, shortly after this, I noticed a man walk around the SUV, and it was the same guy who I had seen inside. This was enough for me to turn around instantly where I was and walk back towards the store. I went all the way back inside of the Toys R Us. Unfortunately, not long after making it inside, I saw the man enter the store as well. I wasn't really sure what to do. The guy seemed to be following me, and I didn't know why. His car was parked right next to mine for some strange reason as well. I walked into the store and went down a random aisle. When I did, I saw the man walking a ways away, but in my direction. I just started walking through random aisles of the store. The man was not right behind me or anything. Occasionally, I would look back and see him off in the distance. I'm not sure if he was trying to make it seem like he wasn't following me, but I could tell. I decided to call my husband. I took out my cell phone and called our home phone. Thankfully, he was quick to answer. When I told him what was going on, he said he would be on his way. We luckily lived pretty close by, and it was easily under 10 minutes. I continued to walk around the store. To delay time even more, I picked out another random toy for our daughter. Then I went to buy that as well. When I went to check out, I saw the man get in line right behind me. I'm not sure what he was getting, if anything, but when I left the checkout area, I decided to leave the store again. This time, I saw my husband's car was parked right across from mine and the SUV. I also noticed that the man was following me again, and I heard his footsteps approaching from behind. When I started walking outside, the man left the store as well. My husband emerged from his vehicle and also started approaching me. At that time, the man behind me actually changed directions. He went to the left, almost to the next row of parking spaces, but then quickly almost ran to his SUV, got inside of it, and left. After that, we both went home. I'm grateful that my husband was able to help me out. That man was much larger than I was, and I did not carry any pepper spray at the time. After that, I started to, but luckily, nothing like that has happened since. This is something that happened like 5 years ago now, but I still remember it really well. It's probably the craziest experience that I've ever had going to Walmart. During this time, I shopped at Walmart quite a bit. I found it to be the cheapest place to get groceries and things like that. However, I was not a huge fan of the store. It was often really busy, and I saw a lot of strange things in my times there. Well, one day, I stopped at Walmart after work, which was a bad idea. I arrived to the Walmart parking lot at probably about 5:30 p.m., and right off the bat, things weren't looking good. I noticed that the parking lot was packed and there were cars everywhere. I drove along the back side of it, and when I was doing so, a car pulled out of one of the parking aisles and nearly hit me. I had to slam on my brakes to avoid them. After that, I parked and started to walk into the store. But when I was about to go across the crosswalk right in front of the doors, a car blew past it. It came within probably 5 feet of hitting me, so I was already a little bit aggravated at that point. When I walked inside the store, I got a shopping basket and started heading to the grocery section. I really just had to get groceries, and I would be getting about 10 different things or so. I noticed that there were several long lines for the checkouts, and there were countless people walking around in the store. As I walked down one of the main aisles in the grocery section, somebody popped out and nearly hit me with their cart. This was a rough shopping trip to that point, but it only got worse. So I was at the far back wall in the grocery department getting a gallon of milk. Out of nowhere, I heard this voice behind me. It was a child's voice. I looked and saw this little girl who was maybe about 7 years old. She had a full Walmart shopping cart next to her that looked like she had been pushing by herself. The little girl said hi to me and I said hi back to her and was very confused. She then asked me if I could pay for the groceries for her and her family because they didn't have any money. I asked her if those were her groceries. The cart was literally almost all the way full, and it was easily over $100 worth of items. Not even all of it was groceries, there were some other things too. I said no, I was sorry, but I couldn't. I mean, the whole reason that I was shopping at Walmart anyways is because I didn't have much money at the time. If I wasn't worried about saving money, I would have certainly been at Target instead or the local grocery store, but those places costed more. The little girl didn't say anything back to me, and then just pushed her shopping cart away in another direction. I thought it was really strange what was going on, and I watched to see where the girl would go. The store was busy and a lot of other people were around, but I noticed that the girl went not that far away. Near a display with frozen foods, the girl went to a woman who I assumed to be her mother. I had to get yogurt, and they were kind of standing near the yogurt, so I ended up going closer to them. As I was getting yogurt, just a few feet away from the mother and daughter with their cart, I overheard them speaking. I heard the mother say something like, "Now go to that man over there and ask him." I looked over my shoulder and saw the girl pushing the shopping cart, which was just about as tall as she was. She made it over to this guy who was standing near another section. I saw her approach him and speak with the guy for maybe 30 seconds. Then she started walking back towards her mother with the cart. I was thinking that maybe they would be able to get somebody to pay for their groceries if their cart wasn't completely full. But I also didn't like the idea of the mother trying to use her daughter to ask strangers to pay for them. I continued with my shopping and went to another section of the grocery department. I went down several aisles getting numerous items before I was almost done. I would say maybe 15 minutes later, and I was just about done shopping and near the bakery now. There were still kind of a lot of people around, and the store was still very busy. When I was looking at a few different breads, I heard the little girl approach me again. I turned around, and she once more asked me to pay for their stuff. I told the girl that she already asked me that, and I said no. I then asked the girl if her mother always makes her ask strangers to pay for their stuff, and she said yes. Then I asked her why, and the girl said so they could get stuff for free. After that, I asked her if she liked asking the people, and the girl was starting to say no, but just as she was answering, her mother came out of seemingly nowhere. The mom got between me and the full shopping cart and almost got right in my face. She angrily asked me why I was talking to her daughter. I told the mother that she asked me to pay for their stuff, and I asked her why she made her daughter go up to strangers like this. The mother said that it was none of my business. She was clearly angry. I told the mother that people might actually pay for them if they had less in the cart, and the mother's response shocked me. She responded by literally saying that they had a cart just as big paid for 2 days prior. This made me think maybe she's not so needy. When she said this, I said something like, "Why do you need so much stuff again then? Do you have 20 kids at home or something?" I then told her to just leave me alone, and I started to walk away. That's when the woman rammed me with her cart. I felt it hit me in the back of my legs as well as my lower back, and it was quite painful. I almost fell over, but didn't. I stopped and turned around, and the woman cussed at me a few times. At that point, I yelled at the woman to get away from me, and as much as I wanted to get in her face and argue with her, I knew that wouldn't be a good idea, so I started walking away again. By now, several people around were staring at the commotion. The woman tossed a few more expletives my way as I walked off, so I thought that was the end of that. I went a few aisles away from the woman and tried to finish up my shopping. It was probably 5 minutes later when I suddenly heard a cart coming towards me at a fast speed. I looked to my left, just in time to see the woman pushing her full cart at me again. This time, I stopped it with my hands, but she still ran into me pretty hard, and it also hit me in the legs a little. The woman once again started cursing me out. She backed up the cart and then tried ramming it into me multiple more times. There were quite a few people nearby who were witnessing what was going on. We shouted at each other for a few moments before some Walmart employees and random shoppers stepped between us. The argument was broken up for the most part, but the woman would not calm down. Walmart ended up calling the police, who showed up really fast. The woman then claimed that I had attacked her, which was completely false. After she got really angry with police as well as Walmart employees and refused to leave the store, they ended up arresting her. The witnesses nearby also confirmed that she had rammed me with the cart multiple times and that I had never even touched her. I really couldn't believe the whole situation. But after that, I was able to leave. The girl, who I think was the woman's daughter, but I'm not even sure, went with police officers. I felt bad for her, but hopefully she had family or friends who would take care of her and be more responsible than that woman was. After that, I never stepped foot in another Walmart. I used to go hiking here and there. I went one time about a year ago on this trail that went into the middle of the woods. The area that I live in is a little out in the country, and there's a lot of good places to hike. So I was at this one hiking trail, and this was my first time at this one in particular. I started on the trail and things were fine. There seemed to be nobody else there at all. The trail was very long, but I say that because when I arrived, there were no cars in the parking lot. And as I started hiking, I did not see or hear anybody either. I went on the trail for about 30 minutes. By that time, I had reached a part that was in the middle of really thick woods on both sides. As I was walking down the path, I remember hearing a noise ahead, just inside of the woods. It was pretty far ahead, but I stopped to look. Of course, I figured that it was probably an animal of some kind. Moments later, instead of an animal though, a man appeared on the path. This man had long straight hair and a mustache. He walked out to the middle of the path and sort of faced me, but did not seem to be looking at me. Then he just stood there. I continued to stand where I was too. After the man didn't move for a few moments, I actually thought about turning around and going back. It just seemed really weird to me. But then I thought that I would just keep going and walk right past the guy. I approached the man, who was still standing right in the center of the path. He started to look at me as I got closer and was just staring. When I got real close to him, I waved and said hi. The man did not say hi back to me or wave. When I reached him, I was going to go around, but he stepped in front of me. The guy asked me where I was going, and I said that I was just walking on the trail. Right after the man started talking, he seemed a little bit off, like maybe he was on drugs of some kind or something. He was acting pretty sketchy, and then he told me to follow him. I said no thanks, and I decided that I would just walk back then. I said I really had to get going, and the man said okay. So I turned around and started to walk back. The man just continued to stand in the same spot for a while. Then I heard some noises just inside the woods on the trail, and I turned around. I saw the man walking back into the woods. I was glad to be getting away from him, because he seemed very strange, and I didn't know what he was doing. So I was just going to walk back to my car in the parking lot. But a couple of minutes in, I heard a noise pretty far back behind me on the trail. I turned around and noticed that the man was now walking on the trail behind me. He was pretty far back, but I saw that he was now carrying what looked like a large stick. I tried to walk a little bit faster and kept going. As I was doing so, I did my best to ignore the man. I could sort of hear him walking a ways back, so I would know if he was getting closer. About 5 minutes later, the man was still there, walking on the trail behind me. But shortly after, I stopped hearing him. I felt better and thought that he must finally be gone. But then, I heard him again a few minutes after that. He was still following me. The longer this went on, the more nervous that I became. Without really trying, I was now walking extremely fast, and it seemed like the man was keeping up with me. But he was not really getting any closer, which was good. This continued for what felt like a very long time. At last, I could see the beginning of the trail, where the parking lot was. I got out my keys as I approached, and when I reached the parking lot, I looked back again. The man was still there. I quickly unlocked my car, got inside, and then locked it. As I was driving away, I looked back and I saw the man reach the parking lot. He watched me drive away, and I was really glad to be getting out of there. I ended up reporting the guy for following me and his sketchy behavior. I didn't want another hiker to encounter him. After that experience, I've not been back to that trail. I don't really know who the man was, how he got to the park, or what he was doing. It was really strange for him to follow me all that distance. I have a crazy story to tell from one time that I went to McDonald's. So this was years ago now, and I went to McDonald's one Saturday in the afternoon. I live by the city, so there's a lot of people who live in the area. Many businesses are very busy on the weekends. So I walked inside of the McDonald's and I saw several long lines to order. It was nothing too crazy, but I was surprised at just how many people were there. So I got into the back of one of the lines and waited. McDonald's is usually pretty fast, and the line started moving quickly. I was really hungry and craving a Big Mac. As I waited and slowly moved up in the line, many people got in line behind me as well. I was watching the employees scramble to keep up with all the orders, and it was a hectic scene. So eventually, I was up next to order. That's when I heard a little bit of talking behind me, and I sensed somebody approaching. I turned around to look, just in time to see a man approaching me. When he saw me, he asked if he could just go in front of me quick, because he just wanted a glass of water and was really thirsty. I said sure, because obviously that wouldn't take long at all to just get a water cup. The man then stood in front of me and waited for the person at the counter to finish ordering. Once they had, the man stepped up to the employee behind the register. At first, I was kind of zoned out like I had been, just observing and waiting. But then, after probably 30 seconds, I snapped out of it and I realized what was strange. The man was just talking to the employee as if he was ordering. He wasn't just getting a water cup. I took a step forward and listened. I heard the man ordering food, and he was ordering quite a bit of things as well. He must have ordered enough food for 5 people. As he was rattling off more items, I tapped him on the shoulder. When I did, he did a half turn and then waved me off in the rudest possible way. I asked him what on earth he was doing, but he ignored me. The man was even looking at the menu and asking the employee questions about stuff. He took at least another minute and a half to order, and it made me really mad. When he was finally done, he walked away to wait, and I stepped up and I ordered what I was getting. After that, I went over to wait as well, and I saw the guy standing near the drink machine. I then confronted him, telling him that he told me he was just getting a water. The man said he changed his mind, and I told him that I never would have let him in front of me if I knew that. When I said this, the man just told me to shut up and then laughed in my face. Obviously, this made me angry, and I told him that he was a terrible person before finally walking away. But as I started to walk away, I guess the guy came up behind me because the next thing I knew, he splashed me with his drink. My hair got wet and a bunch of people saw it. It was embarrassing, but this guy also looked like a real jerk in front of all the people as well. I didn't bother to go after him and fight him or something. I knew better than to get into a fist fight at my local McDonald's. So I moved away and dried myself off. A couple people asked me if I was alright. Then I remembered that my order was called before the man's order. It was probably because he ordered so much more stuff than I did. I walked up and had to go past the guy who was standing right in front of the counter getting in everybody's way. When I got my order, he looked at me and I said to him, "Look who got their order first, loser." Then I started to leave. The guy did not say anything back to me. I then left the McDonald's and walked to my car. Well, I guess the guy followed me out. He must have been mad about what I said, because when I reached my car, I heard him approaching. I turned around, and this time the guy splashed his drink on my car. He then kicked my headlight, cursed at me, and walked back inside. I was furious, but the car did not appear to have damage, so I just got inside of it and drove home. It would only cause more problems to keep getting into it with this guy. Luckily, after that, I never saw him again. The whole thing was so stupid and crazy. I hope that guy learned a lesson though and is nicer to people. This happened many years ago, in the late 1980s. I was much younger, and during a short period of time, I used to hitchhike. For months, I did it without any problems. I didn't have a whole lot of money during this time, and obviously I had no car. I moved around a lot, and would take buses quite often, but hitchhiking could be done where there were no buses. So I remember that one night, I was trying to go to a city about 20 minutes away. I knew pretty much where it was, and I was going to hitchhike to get there. So I stood on the side of a pretty busy road. It was nighttime, and I had finished working a temporary job just before. After standing on the side of the road for about 10 minutes with most cars passing by, one finally stopped. After the car pulled over, I saw that a man was behind the wheel. He rolled down the passenger side window and asked me where I was going. I told him, and then he told me to hop into the car. So I got inside what was a pretty standard sedan for that time period. Then we left. Things started out normal. We made some brief chit-chat as we started driving. I don't remember what we talked about, but it was probably just basic stuff. Then things got quiet for a while, but I remember that after probably 10 to 15 minutes of driving, the man turned off the road that we were on. I was pretty sure that it was a straight shot to get to where I was going, so I didn't know why he would turn. After we drove on this random road for a while, I asked the guy where he was going. He turned at seemingly another back road and then said that he had to stop somewhere first. When I asked him where, he did not answer me. Things were starting to seem kind of strange at that point. The guy kept driving through back roads and soon went onto a dirt road. This one was even more quiet and seemingly in the middle of nowhere. I remember at that point, I asked again where we were going. The man just said, "You'll see." When he said that, I got a terrible feeling. I desperately wanted to get out of the car. So after going down this road for a while, he then started to turn. There was this really long and narrow driveway, it appeared. I could not even see a house or anything because of how narrow and long it was. When the man slowed down to make the turn into the driveway, he was starting to go down it, and I just opened the door. Luckily, I was able to, and after doing so, I just jumped out. I rolled into the grass next to the trees on the side of the drive, and I was fortunately not hurt. I heard and saw the car braking on the gravel driveway in front of me. I got onto my feet as quickly as possible and then took off running in the other direction. I went to the end of the driveway and back onto the road. Then I crossed the dirt road and went into the woods. It was dark over there with no streetlights, and the woods were pretty dense. I walked deep into them, and for a while I heard the car in the distance on the road, which was likely trying to look for me. I kept going through the woods for a long time. Eventually, I saw another road, or possibly it was the same one, I don't even know. But I went back onto a road and walked alongside of it for a long time. I was ready to dart back into the woods if the same car approached, but luckily I never saw it. After walking that road for a really long time, and eventually making it to another one, I noticed a gas station. It was thankfully open, and I went inside and asked where the nearest town was. I was told it was just about a mile up the road, and there was a motel. I ended up walking there and staying there for the night. I've never forgot that story, and I still remember it very well. I'm not sure what that man had planned, but I'm glad that I got away. This is something that happened back during my freshman year of high school. It was early in the school year, and I was 14 years old. During this time, I had just recently gotten my first cell phone, which was an iPhone. I'd gotten a lot of apps, such as Snapchat and all the other popular ones. I was fairly new to the school district that I was in as well, and had just moved to the city during middle school. Every day, I would get up and ride the bus to and from school. One day, I got home from school just like any other. My parents were still at work, so I was at home by myself. I was added by a person on Snapchat who I did not know. I don't even remember what exactly their username was. I think the name was Joe or John something, and then a few numbers. This was back in 2013, so Snapchat was still fairly new, and I was also very new to it. I added this person back and thought that maybe it was a guy who went to my school. The school was large and there were tons of people who I didn't really know yet. So not long after adding this guy back, he sent me a snap. I remember that he did not show his face, and it was either a black screen or close to it. There were words on it though, and he said hi, and then I said hi back to him. Then he asked me if I had a Kik. I did, and I gave him my username, and then he added me there a short time after. If anybody doesn't know, Kik was an instant messaging app for chatting. You could send messages as well as pictures, and I think go into chat rooms as well. I believe the app is still around, but it was a lot more popular back then. Also during this time, Snapchat did not have a chat feature. You could only send pictures, and they would also go by pretty fast, and that's another reason why apps like Kik were popular. After adding each other on Kik, the guy started messaging me there. At first, it was just a really casual conversation. I remember that I was curious as to who he was exactly. Looking back, I wish I had never talked to him, but I didn't really have that many friends at the time, and it was nice to talk to somebody. However, I was under the impression that it was a guy around my age maybe, so we were just having a very basic conversation. It was just like, "What's up? Not much, how about you?" Just hanging out. I remember that he asked me who was at my house, and I said that I was alone. That's when this guy said that he was going to come over. I thought that it was a joke. I had no idea who this guy was still, and obviously he wouldn't know where I lived. I don't remember what exactly I said back, but I didn't hear from him for a while. Never did I ever think that he would actually come to my house though. I was just in my room doing homework and half watching YouTube videos on my phone. After maybe 20 or 30 minutes, there was this knock at the front door. I had no idea who it could be, but I didn't bother to get up from my desk or leave my room because I thought that it was just a door-to-door salesman or something. I had no interest of answering the door to that. But then I saw that the guy sent me another message on Kik. He said that he was at my house. I really couldn't believe it. But then he sent me a picture of my front door. I was really freaked out when I saw it. He told me to come to the door. I really didn't know what to say. Finally, I took my phone and I wrote back. I said, "Who even are you?" The guy didn't answer right away. I got up from my desk and walked to the doorway of my room. This led out into the hallway, and then the living room was off of that. I carefully left my room and went out into the hallway. Then, once there, I crept to the corner and looked into the living room. I could see out of the front window from there. The front step was partially obstructed, but I did see a man standing there. He was not a high school student. It was a grown man, probably in his 40s. He was kind of short, a little bit bigger, and balding. I had never seen him before in my life. He was looking around, and then I heard him knock on the door. I stayed where I was. I was really creeped out now and didn't know what to do. The guy stayed there and then actually tried opening the door before knocking on it. I stayed where I was and I didn't move. After a few minutes, I saw him on his phone, and then he turned and he walked off. But he wasn't leaving. He was just going around to the back door. He walked around, and within a couple of minutes, I heard a knocking coming from the back door to the house. Then he tried opening that door. I looked to my phone, and it was blowing up with notifications. I went over and looked at them. The man kept asking me to let him in and to open the door. Instead, I decided to call the police. I took my phone, closed my bedroom doors, and then went under my bed and called 911. I told them that somebody was trying to get into the house and would not leave. I was told that the police would be on the way and they would arrive within a few minutes. While I was waiting, I tried not to pay attention to the man knocking on the doors. I just hoped that he would go away soon. After probably 5 to 10 minutes, I stopped hearing the knocking at the doors. When the police got there, I finally left my room again. Unfortunately, the man was gone. When I looked back to Kik, he had sent me a few more messages cursing at me. I showed everything to the police. They said they would look into it, and if the man came back, to call them again. My parents got informed as well, and they were back home a short time later. Luckily, after that, I never saw the guy again. I'm still not sure how he knew where I lived or even who I was. The only thing that I can think of is that he must have seen me either getting on the bus for school or after school. It still creeps me out to think back to it. I used to use Craigslist from time to time. I've bought and sold several things on it over the years. But something crazy happened several years ago. I was selling my PS4 and decided to list it on Craigslist. This was back when the PS4 was the newest PlayStation and the 5 hadn't come out yet, so I would be able to get a decent amount of money for it. The PlayStation worked perfectly fine, and I also had some games that I was selling along with it. I took pictures and then listed them on Craigslist and hoped that somebody would buy it soon. Within a day, I got a response from somebody. A guy texted me introducing himself as Darren. He told me that he wanted to buy the PlayStation and asked when he could get it. I told him he could any time, and I even made sure that the price was good with him, and he said yes. He asked for my address, but I said that we could meet at this local strip mall. I wanted to conduct business in a public space. Darren agreed to this, and we arranged to meet the next evening at 7 o'clock. So I packed up the PlayStation and headed out to the strip mall. It was pretty close by, and Darren arrived just minutes after me. We met in the back of the parking lot. Luckily, things were pretty quiet there that night. After meeting Darren, I showed him the PlayStation and asked him for the money. Darren told me that he didn't have the money right then, but that he would give it to me when he got paid the next week. I was angry when I heard that. I said no. If he didn't have the money, I wasn't going to give him the PS4. Darren seemed confused and upset, as if I was just going to give it to him. I told him that when he got paid, he could come and buy it then, but Darren demanded to get it now and claimed that he promised he would pay me. Of course, I was not that stupid, and I still said no. I put the PlayStation back in my car and told Darren to text me when he had the money. Darren was still trying to get me to give it to him though. I closed the door and got inside my car as Darren was still trying to talk to me. When I got inside of my car, he started knocking at my driver's window and telling me to listen to him. I just ignored him though. I told him to move, but he refused. So then I just started backing out to leave. As soon as I did this, Darren finally left my car, but only to go to his vehicle. He then got inside of his car, and I thought nothing of it. But as I was leaving and driving out of the parking lot pulling onto the road, I saw Darren's car come whipping up behind me quickly. When I got onto the road, he was right behind me. As I started driving home, I feared that he would follow me, so I took this random turn, and sure enough, Darren did as well. I could not believe that this guy was going to follow me because I wouldn't fall for what was likely his scam attempt. I made a few more random turns, which Darren did as well. He was following extremely close to me, so close that I was afraid that his car might bump mine. His driving also seemed to be a little bit erratic. I wanted to call the cops, but then I had the idea to just drive to them. I quickly got directions to the nearest police station and then drove there. Darren followed me the entire way until he realized where we were going. I went into the parking lot and he drove away. I decided to report what happened, but I don't think anything could really be done. After that, I went home. Darren texted me that night, cursing me out, and I blocked his number. I ended up selling the PlayStation to someone else a few days later. After that though, I haven't done any buying or selling on Craigslist. I know that most of the time it works out fine, but I just don't want to take the chance and deal with any more sketchy people like Darren. This story happened several months ago now. I'm a female for reference and went to Walmart pretty late one night. I'm not sure exactly what time it was, but the store was very quiet. I was just getting about 2 or 3 items and was not going to take very long. So when I was inside of the store, there was hardly anybody else inside, just a few employees and customers here and there. I shopped for maybe 5 minutes if that, then went up to the front of the store to check out. At the self-checkouts, nobody else was really around, but there was one employee standing sort of near it. I started to walk inside, and the Walmart employee spoke. He said that all the self-checkouts were out of order and I couldn't use them. The man said he could ring me up quick and motioned for me to follow him. We walked a couple of lanes down to the checkouts and the guy walked behind it. He was sort of short, had long light brown hair, and was kind of skinny as well. I put my items down in front of him and he started to scan them. He asked me how my day was going like many cashiers do. But after that, he asked me where I was going now, and I just said that I was going back home. The guy then asked me if I wanted to hang out with him, and I said no thanks. It seemed really strange for him to ask me this. He asked me if I wanted to get some food instead or something like that. Still, I said that I really had to get going. The man didn't say anything. He angrily handed me my receipt, and then I started to walk away. I found the whole interaction to be really weird and also awkward. So I left the store and then headed to my car in the parking lot. I had to go all the way to the other side of the store though, because they had closed the doors on the side that I had parked on. So after walking out, I had just about made it to my car and was maybe 20 feet away from it. That's when out of nowhere, I heard a voice behind me. I looked and saw the Walmart employee who I had just seen like a minute before. It really took me by surprise, and he seemed to come out of nowhere. He once more asked me where I was going. As I saw him walking closer to me, I quickly went to my car and got inside of it. Luckily, he didn't run over and try to get in my car or anything. I started the engine and drove away. Since that happened, I have not been back to that Walmart, or any Walmart for that matter. I'm not sure if that guy was off work when he did that or what, but I think it's really crazy how he followed me all the way to my vehicle. I also wonder if the self-checkouts were really shut down, or if he just wanted me to go to his register. Either way, I have no plans to return to that Walmart, and I'm hoping that I never see that guy again. This happened when I was much younger. I was around 12 years old or so. I remember that when I was growing up, we had a house that had a really big backyard. It was so large that there were several acres of dense woods beyond our little open area. We would often have all kinds of wild animals pass through the backyard, but by far the kind that we would see the most was deer. I would also go out into the backyard all the time because I was a pretty active kid and I enjoyed being in the outdoors. I didn't go very far into the woods much, however, though, because it was so dense and large. It would be easy to get lost, and we didn't have actual paths back there. So one evening, I was out in the backyard waiting to be called in for dinner. The sun was almost setting, and I remember hearing a noise on the edge of the woods. I looked over and saw a deer standing there. We made eye contact after a moment. The deer stared at me for several seconds before finally turning and moving back farther into the woods. I wanted to see where it was going, so I followed the deer a little bit. I got to the edge of the woods and saw the deer maybe 50 feet farther in. Then I noticed that there was another one. I started to walk farther and farther into the woods. I was trying to be careful not to startle the deer anymore, but they seemed to be moving farther away from me anyways. I ended up going pretty deep into the woods. The deer had completely disappeared, but I was still trying to see them. Eventually, though, I gave up and then started to head back. By now, I was pretty far out and was surrounded by trees. Plus, it was getting pretty dark outside. As I was making my way back, though, I heard another sound coming from behind me. Figuring that it was another deer, I turned around and looked. I saw a bush being moved about 30 or 40 feet away from me. I thought that it had to be an animal, but the split second I saw the bush moving, it didn't look like it. I kept watching and then saw a man come out from behind the bush and then go behind a tree. I didn't get a real good look at him, but it was enough to tell that I didn't know the man. It appeared to be some random guy and was not one of the neighbors. Nobody was supposed to be in our yard, so this was really strange. Immediately, I felt the need to go back to the house as fast as possible. But for some reason, I just stood there and kept looking directly at the guy. I think I was just in disbelief. So after a moment or two, the man came out from behind the tree. He was looking right at me, and then he started to walk in my direction. I turned and started sprinting back for the house. I ran probably as fast as I ever ran before. I did not bother to look back and see where the man was at this point. Soon, I was luckily able to make it back to the open part of our backyard. I kept running and then made it to the house and went inside. I locked the door and then quickly found my parents. I told them about the guy, and we then looked out of all the windows. The man was nowhere in sight. He must have stayed in the woods. My dad then went outside to look around, and even went a short ways into the woods. He came back and said that he didn't hear anything, and even called out asking if anybody was there. He also didn't see the man and said that the guy must have left, probably realizing that he shouldn't be here. I felt much better knowing that I was safe and inside. The rest of the night was fine, and I went to bed around the time that I usually did. However, before I fell asleep, I was lying in my bed, and I had my window open a crack to get some cool air inside. I heard the wind and the sound of crickets, but then I heard another sound. It was somebody walking out in the yard pretty close to my window. I looked over and at first saw nothing, but then a man came into view. The same man who I had seen in the woods earlier. He started walking right up to my window. Somehow, I had the awareness to quickly run over and shut the window and lock it. The man literally walked right in front of my face on the other side and looked at me. It was a terrifying moment, but I'm so glad that I closed the window. Then I bolted out of the room. Luckily, my parents were still awake and in the living room. I told them about the guy. They came into my bedroom, but the man was gone by then. Once more, my dad went outside into the yard, except this time, we called the police as well. They came out and did a search of the property, but couldn't cover the entire woods because it was pretty large. The man was able to get away. I slept with my lights on and windows covered for weeks, but luckily the man never came back and I never saw him again. Thinking about that experience still gives me the creeps. I'm really glad that I was able to close my window on time though. When I was 17 years old, I got my first job ever. It was to be a pizza delivery driver for a pizza place near where I lived. I lived with my parents and was still in high school at this time. So mostly I would work on weekends, but some weeknights as well. One time I was working a Friday night and we stayed open really late, so I would work longer shifts on those nights. This was after I had the job for a few months and had pretty much gotten used to things. When I went out for a delivery at about 11 p.m., I left the pizza place, and I remember I was seemingly followed. The roads were pretty quiet with it being 11 o'clock at night. So when I was driving to the address, probably just a few minutes into the drive, I noticed headlights behind me. I didn't think much of it until they were still there when I was approaching the address to make the delivery. So when I got to the street for the delivery, the car was still there. I pulled over to the side of the road in front of the house that I was delivering to. It was pretty much just a regular residential street. The car behind me continued down the street as I pulled over. This made me feel a lot better. Then I got out and delivered the pizza. I got back into my car afterwards, and then I started to drive back to work. I turned around and headed back down the street. But when I got to the end of the street, I saw headlights behind me again. It was probably the same person. They ended up following me almost all the way back to the pizza place, except they randomly turned away within a few minutes of it. I was able to get back, but I found the whole thing very strange. I had no idea why anybody would be following me like that. I had another delivery to make a short time later. During this one, I got followed again, this time for just part of the way. I remember seeing the headlights again, and they started to follow me. I didn't know what I was going to do, but then, within just a few minutes, the headlights were gone. I made the rest of the delivery and back without any problems. The next delivery was completely fine. I didn't notice myself being followed at all. But the one after that, the car returned. By now, it was well after midnight. This time was very similar to the first. The car followed me almost the entire way to the house and back, but not quite the whole way. Then I had my final delivery of the night. For this one, I did not see the car at all, and I felt slightly better about that. I was back at the pizza place for a short time after that, and then I got off of work. I left work and started driving back home. Unfortunately, when I was a few minutes into the drive home, the car showed up again. When I saw it, I had a terrible feeling, because I didn't want it to follow me to my house. I remember that I tried calling my parents, but it was really late and they were both already asleep. I didn't know what else to do. The drive back home took maybe 10 minutes, and the car followed me the whole way. When I was approaching my street though, I first turned onto it. My plan was to go around the block a few times and see if the car would keep following me. But when I first turned, the car behind me did not. Then I was able to drive the rest of the way home and pull into the driveway. I kept looking around, careful that the car would return, but I did not see it. I quickly went inside after that. I was not followed like that the entire rest of the time that I worked at the pizza place. I still don't know who was following me that day or why. This happened back when I was a kid. I was pretty young, I think about 7 years old or so. I remember that when I was a kid, I always loved going to Toys R Us. My parents didn't really go there too much, but whenever they did, I was sure to go along. I have a younger sister, and during this time, she would have been about 3 or 4 years old. One time, I went with my mom and sister to the local Toys R Us. I don't remember the exact reason why we were there. I don't think that I was supposed to be getting anything though. Still, I was glad to go with and look at all the toys. It was really the only toy store that I remember going to as a kid. So we got there, and I was walking around following my mom and sister and looking at everything. Most of the time we would go to a store, there would be 1 or 2 aisles of toys, and here it was the entire place. The store really was not that busy. I don't remember exactly what day of the week we went on or what time it was, but I do remember there being not that many other people around. So after following my mom and sister for a while, I found this area of toys that I was really interested in. My mom knew that I liked it, and she was going to go to another part of the store with my sister. I remember she asked me if I wanted to stay in that area or come with her, and obviously I chose to stay, because I think she was going to one of the girl aisles for my sister. She then told me where she would be and said she would come back to get me. Then her and my sister left. I stayed where I was, and nobody else was in the immediate area. After a while though, I wanted to go back to my mom. I don't remember exactly why, but I did. I should have just stayed where I was and waited for her to come back, but I was young, so I remember that I left the area to go and find my mom. I figured that it would be really easy. Unfortunately for me, it was not. I got lost pretty quickly and didn't really know where in the store I was. Then I started to get worried that I would not be able to find my mom at all. After walking around for a short time, this nice woman approached me. I'm not really sure how long she saw me wandering around, but she came up to me and asked if I was okay. She was very friendly, and she asked me if I was looking for my mom, and I told her yes. She told me that she had seen my mom and knew where she was. I don't know why, but I completely believed her. So the woman told me to follow her, and I started walking next to her. We went down a few random aisles. I remember the next thing I knew, we were near the front of the store and the entrance. It appeared as though this woman was just going to walk right out the doors with me. As we got closer, I remember seeing this man just standing by the doors. He was alone, and I remember he looked at me and also looked at the woman. We were walking closer and closer to him. Now, I knew that my mom hadn't left. She definitely would have come and found me before, and certainly wouldn't have gone outside without me. I remember telling the woman that my mom was at the girls' aisle, but the woman just completely ignored me. I had to have told her that like 2 or 3 times in a row. She did not stop walking and did not say anything. So when we got within like 30 feet of the door, I just stopped. I then turned around and just ran in the other direction. The woman did not run after me. I went as far into the store as I could, and as I continued to walk around, I remember finally noticing all the pink from the girls' aisles. So I went over there, and I actually found my mom. I remember that after that, I did not see the woman or the man inside the store, and they must have left. I also did not go far away from my mom for the rest of the time we were there. Years ago, I was driving down the street one night. I was on my way home after working pretty late. By this time, most of the roads were quiet. I had left the highway and was on more local roads. However, I still had about 15 minutes of driving left before I would get back to my apartment. As I was driving down the road, there was mostly woods on both sides at this point. I remember that I was approaching a stop sign and saw somebody standing on the side of the road nearby. It was a man, and he had a small backpack with him. It appeared as though he was hitchhiking. This was really strange to see. I had never seen anybody hitchhiking in this area before. Plus, hitchhiking in general has not been very popular in a long time. It can be obviously pretty dangerous for everybody involved. When I came to a stop at the stop sign, the man looked right at me and waved as if to ask me to let him in. After briefly stopping, I accelerated through the quiet intersection and kept going. The man remained standing by the stop sign. I continued with my drive down the road. However, I got about a minute down the road, and after a gradual turn in the road, it became very straight. That's when I saw a bunch of brake lights up ahead. There appeared to be a traffic jam. Cars were stopped on the road for almost as far as I could see. I had no idea why. I thought maybe there was a crash or something. For this many cars to be backed up, people must have been waiting for a while though, because it was late at night. So I slowed down and eventually I came to a complete stop behind the car in front of me. I really didn't know what exactly was going on. After stopping, I waited and the traffic did not move at all. I remember that after a few minutes, I actually put my car into park. I rolled down both my windows to get a breeze of fresh air because it was a nice cool night. I then went on my phone to look up what was going on and maybe find an alternate route. This had been the only way that I had gone home from work, and I didn't know anything else. There weren't a ton of roads out in this area. I couldn't really find anything about it online at the moment though, and looking ahead, all that I could really see was just brake lights of other cars. So I continued to sit there, stopped, and I started looking for an alternate route. But suddenly, out of nowhere, I heard this noise to my right. As soon as I looked up, I saw somebody at my passenger side window. It was a man. He instantly climbed inside the window, and the next thing I knew, he was in my passenger seat. It happened so fast that I never had a chance to put the window up, and the guy was not that large, so he was able to make it in easily. After getting inside, I realized that it was the same man that I had seen hitchhiking just minutes earlier. After he got in my car, I asked him what he was doing. The guy said that he really needed a ride. I told him to get out of my car, and he said no. The guy claimed that he just wanted to go a couple of towns over. I told him again to leave my car. The man did not answer me. I didn't know what to do. To be honest, I wanted to get out of my car and run away, but I did not do that. I told the man that I was going to call the police, and the guy instantly snapped back, saying that he wouldn't let me do that. What exactly that meant, I did not know. The guy moved a little closer to me. I just pushed the horn at that point and did not take my hand off it. The man told me to stop, but I didn't. After a few seconds, some other people nearby started honking as well, probably because they were annoyed at me. The man reached over and tried grabbing my arm. I screamed for help, and my windows were open, so people had to have heard me. At that point, I could not believe it, but the man finally left. He opened up the passenger's door and leaped out. Then he ran off, disappearing into the woods that was next to the road. After that, someone actually got out of their car and were approaching me. I told them what happened and let them know that I was not honking just to be annoying. Eventually, traffic started moving. It probably took about 15 minutes. I did not see the guy at all. It turned out that the traffic jam was caused by a traffic light which had fallen over. I'm not sure if somebody crashed into it or what, but I'm glad that we got moving again. I still can't believe that the guy just jumped in my car like that. He must have seen the open window. It was one of the scariest moments of my life. When I was a freshman in college, I lived in the dorms and I got a random roommate. I thought that it would work out fine because I get along well with most people and make friends pretty easily. I figured that my roommate would probably get along with me as well, even if we didn't like the same things. Obviously, I hoped that he would have similar interests and maybe we could become good friends, because I didn't really know anybody else at the university that I was going to at the time. Well, when I moved into the dorms, my roommate was not there. His name was Ryan, and his stuff was there, but I wasn't quite sure where he was. After my parents had helped me finish moving in all my stuff and left, Ryan was still nowhere in sight. In fact, he did not show up until the next day. It was when I got back from my first class and had a little bit of time left before my next one. When I entered the room, Ryan was just there, sitting at his desk and apparently doing homework. Ryan was about average height and weight, had glasses, and short blondish colored hair. Right away, he did not seem very friendly. When I entered the room, he turned and looked at me, but did not say hi or anything. Just as fast as he looked at me, he turned his head back to his desk. I said hi and walked over to him and stuck my hand out for a handshake. I remember he sort of hesitated, but did shake my hand. I had a brief conversation with him, asking him about himself. He was not a freshman like me, but a sophomore at the school, and he was from a small town several hours away. That was really all that I gathered. Soon, I went to my next class. After that, things only got more and more strange. Ryan was not often in his room, but when he was, I would sometimes try talking to him. He would usually give me very short answers and never ask me anything about myself. I thought maybe he was just shy or uncomfortable around other people, but at one point, he told me in a very stern way to stop talking to him and to not talk to him anymore. It was pretty rude, and I no longer felt like he was just a shy kid, but a kind of rude one. Still, I didn't want it to be a terrible semester, so I chose not to argue or anything. I decided to just let him be on his side of the room, and I would do my thing on my side. As the weeks went on, Ryan would be gone for sometimes days at a time. I would wake up and he would just be gone. Then when it would be nighttime, he still wouldn't be there, and I wouldn't see him for several days. Then, typically, he'd just walk into the room like nothing happened, or I'd come back and he'd already be there. I never bothered to ask him where he was though, knowing that he didn't want me talking to him. I remember at one point, on one of the days that he was at the dorm, he left sometime in the evening. Hours later, at probably like 11 o'clock at night or so, I remember I heard talking in the hallway. It got louder, and I realized that two guys were arguing. I recognized Ryan's voice to be one of them. He loudly told the guy to shut up, and a few seconds later, he walked into the room. I found out the next day that it was another guy who lived on our floor who he yelled at. Apparently, all the guy said to him was, "Hey, how's it going?" when they passed each other in the hallway. Ryan snapped at him immediately, telling him not to talk to him, which made the other guy angry. They argued briefly before Ryan walked away. I found this out because the other guy came up to me and told me that my roommate was really strange. That's when we had the conversation, and I was kind of creeped out by Ryan's erratic behavior. As the next few weeks went on, I was hoping to be able to get a new roommate when the next semester rolled around. In the meantime, I just ignored Ryan and he did the same to me. It really wasn't that bad because he was typically gone, so it was mostly like I had my own dorm to myself. You just never knew when Ryan would be back or how long he would be there. So one day, I remember that I got up and went to class. Ryan had been gone for the whole night and was still gone when I got up and left. I was away for several hours attending my classes. When I returned to the dorm room, I went inside to see everything on my side of the room just gone. It was the craziest thing that I'd ever seen. The bed, desk, and chair that came with the room were still there, but literally everything that I had was gone. My books, my blankets and pillows, clothes, snacks, and everything was nowhere in sight. Ryan's side of the room looked exactly the same, and Ryan was not there. I went inside the room and looked around, trying to figure out what happened. I was sure that I locked the door when I left, and I immediately suspected Ryan. I started to look on his side of the room. He really didn't have that much stuff to begin with. He really just had some clothes, a few blankets, and some notebooks. There was no place that he could have put all my things. After realizing that my stuff was definitely not in the room, I walked out into the hallway. I went to the resident assistant and told him what happened. We did a small investigation looking around the building, and soon we got in touch with campus security. Unfortunately, the dorm building was really old and did not have any security cameras inside of it. Luckily, I had made a few friends by that point in the school year. One had a dorm room all to himself, so I stayed in his spare bed for the next couple of nights. An investigation was done, and Ryan was nowhere to be seen. Several days later, though, my things were found. They were located a little ways into a woods just off campus. He had tossed all my stuff there. Ryan, meanwhile, did not show up for the entire rest of the semester. I was given a new dorm room all to myself by the school, and they also gave me a gift card to buy some new stuff, so that was nice. But as far as I'm aware, Ryan never showed up to campus again. I have no idea where he went. He was a very strange guy, but I'm glad that I didn't have to live with him any longer. I used to work at McDonald's. It's been a few years now, but I'll never forget my time there. Working in fast food can be crazy sometimes, especially at McDonald's, which is one of the most well-known fast food restaurants around. I remember that after getting hired, it took me a few weeks to get used to things. The job was just the second one that I ever had, and I was 17 years old and in high school. But after I got the hang of it, I started to enjoy working there. Most of my coworkers were nice and we got along pretty well. There was one coworker though who seemed to get hired a few weeks after me. It was this guy who I will just call Joe for this story. Joe was about a few years older than me. I remember that I didn't really interact with him at work much. We worked the same time, maybe 3 or 4 shifts. Then one night I worked until 9 p.m. When I got off, after clocking out, I left the building. I had drove to and from work to my parents' house at the time in the old car that I had. When I got out into the parking lot to leave though, I saw Joe standing there. He approached me and said hi. Joe then asked me for a ride, saying that he was stuck there and had no way to get home. I didn't see a reason not to, and I was quick to tell him yes, but I also realized that I hadn't seen him at all that day to that point. I didn't think he had even been working that day, so this seemed kind of weird that he was even here. After we both got into my car, he gave me his address and we left. We talked to each other a decent amount on the drive. He seemed nice for the most part, but also did seem a little bit strange. Something just struck me as odd about him and slightly uncomfortable. But nevertheless, we made it to his house and then he left and went inside. I then drove back to my parents' house. Now, maybe a week or so later, after working another night shift that Joe was not working for, I remember leaving again. I got inside of my car no problem though, but I remember looking around the parking lot and noticing a car with what appeared to be Joe behind the wheel. This car was parked in like the back corner of the lot, and it had been backed into a space. I was wondering what he was doing here again because he hadn't worked and I hadn't seen him. But I didn't really think too much of it, and then I backed out and I left. However, when I got to the stop sign at the end of the parking lot to turn onto the road, I noticed a car approaching me from behind. It was Joe's car. I guessed he was leaving now too, and I pulled onto the quiet road and he turned out right behind me. He then proceeded to follow me all the way back to my street. All I knew was that he didn't live over here because I had given him a ride before, and after all, it wasn't even close to this area. I was confused and also creeped out by this. When I approached my street, I went past another one. I wasn't really sure where to go, so I just went around the block. Then I pulled into some random driveway to turn around, but when I did, I noticed that Joe kept driving down the street. So I waited until he was gone, and then I left that house and I went home. I was confused by why he had followed me and what was going on with him. It was very strange. So fast forward to a few days after that. I was actually on my break at work at McDonald's and I got a text from Joe. There was a group chat for some of the employees, so that's how he had got my number. He asked me if I could give him a ride to work the following day. I mentioned this to a coworker, and I was told that Joe had already been fired. This creeped me out a little bit. I came up with an excuse and told him no. The next time that I worked after that, I found out that Joe had also been banned from the McDonald's now. Apparently, he showed up and got into a confrontation with our boss. I blocked his number after that in case he did anything more, and I never heard from him again. I only worked at the McDonald's for a few more months. Still, I wonder what would have happened if I agreed to give him a ride to the McDonald's. I wonder why he followed me home and why he was so strange. I was selling a desk on Facebook Marketplace a few years ago. It was a pretty nice desk in my opinion, and I had bought it from IKEA just 2 years prior. However, I was going to be moving and I decided to get rid of it. During this time, I lived in a smaller house by myself. I remember that after I made the listing for the desk, it took a couple of days before I got any responses. When I did, I got a message from a man named Charlie. He said that he wanted to buy the desk. There wasn't a whole lot of conversation between us other than that. I was happy that somebody wanted to buy it, and I made sure that he was good with the price, which he said that he was. I thought the price was reasonable, so I was glad to hear that, and then I gave him my address. We agreed that he would come by the next evening at about 5 o'clock. And when the next evening rolled around, I had the desk just inside of my front door for Charlie to come and buy. He got there at about 5, and I let him inside of my house. Charlie was skinny with somewhat curly blondish hair. He was wearing a sweatshirt. After we said hi to each other, I showed Charlie the desk and I told him that I could help him take it to his car. Charlie went up close to the desk and looked at it. After a short time, he told me that the desk did not look like it did in the pictures. I asked him what he meant. I was very confused because it was exactly the same as the pictures. I had taken them just days prior when I had listed the desk, and I really hadn't touched it since. Charlie said that it just wasn't how he thought it would be. Then he said that he decided not to buy it. I was disappointed, but I said okay. Then he turned and left. I was confused by what he had said. I'm not sure what exactly he was expecting, because in my opinion, the desk was just as it was advertised in the listing. I decided to just move on, and hopefully somebody else would want to buy it. So the night went on, and I ended up staying up pretty late. It was nearly midnight. I was in the other room, and I heard the sound suddenly of somebody trying to open the front door. When I heard this, I walked over and looked out of a front window. I saw a man standing there, wearing a hat that was mostly covering his face. But I then realized that this was Charlie. I didn't know what he was doing. After literally trying to open my front door, he then walked away, but he didn't leave. Instead, he walked around to the back side of the house. He tried that door, which thankfully was locked. After that, things were quiet for a bit. Then he returned to the front. This time, he actually knocked on the front door of the house, but I was not going to answer it. After being at the front door, he moved to several windows. It seemed like he was trying to look inside. I had covers for most of them, but I could still see his shadow on the other side. After he was still in my yard prowling around for that long, I decided to call the police. I told them the whole story, and within 10 minutes, an officer was there. Meanwhile, Charlie had stayed there the whole time. When the police arrived, he tried running, but was quickly caught. He did not break in, and I think he ended up getting off for the most part. I have to think, though, that he was trying to find a good place to break into my house. I'm really glad that he didn't. I worked at a Walmart store when I was younger and in high school. This was one of the first jobs that I had, and I didn't have a car yet or a consistent means of transportation. Most of the time, I would get a ride from my parents or older brother. My parents worked odd hours, and my brother also had a job and played football as well, so I never really knew who could drive me, but usually it all worked out. Well, one time I worked a night shift until like 9 p.m. or something like that. I remember that we lived like 10 minutes from the Walmart, and when I got off, I texted my mom. She was not able to come and get me, so I then texted my dad and older brother. Unfortunately, I didn't hear back from them right away. So during this time, I was inside the Walmart in the break room sitting down. Another coworker who I was sort of friends with named Rachel asked me if I was off, knowing that I got done at around 9. I told her yes, but I was waiting for my brother to text me back. Rachel had to leave the break room to go back to work, but said bye or something like that. Then there was just one other person in the break room. It was this guy named Michael, who was about 5 years older than me, if I had to guess. I really didn't know anything about him, other than that he worked at the Walmart, and I think stocked shelves. I had never really spoken with him or crossed paths with him to that point. I had seen him just here and there. He suddenly walked over to me and asked if I needed a ride home. He said that he had just gotten off and was leaving. Now, because I didn't know him that well, I was a little hesitant and I said no thanks. But Michael said that it would be no trouble and he wanted to. He was a coworker, so I figured that he must just be trying to be nice, and I looked at my phone and saw that I hadn't gotten a text back. I was tired and wanted to leave, so I finally said yes. I offered to pay Michael gas money, but he said no. So I followed him out into the parking lot and we walked to his car. It was a really old, rusty, beat-up looking pickup truck. We both got inside and I gave Michael my address. He said that he knew where that was and it wasn't very far away from his place. Then we left. We started to talk during the ride, and we just got to know each other a little bit, asking basic questions and stuff. I wasn't paying that great of attention to the road, but I did notice that Michael turned before it would have been my street. I didn't say anything at first, even though I should have. He drove down this road a little while, and I wasn't really sure what he was doing. I was hoping that maybe he was just taking a different way of getting to my house. We were close, but not at all on the correct street. Then Michael pulled off of that street and into this parking lot of an apartment complex. He proceeded to drive up to it and park in one of the spaces. I asked him where we were, and he said that this was his apartment. I told him that he was supposed to drive me home, not go to his place. He then said that I may as well come inside and hang out for a while then. I was angry and said that I didn't want to. I told him to drive me home, and he said no. I told Michael that I really had to get home. It was late and I had school the next morning. Michael told me that I could stay the night at his place, which I obviously said no to. Michael then said too bad and just started walking into his apartment. Now, I was at least a few miles from home, in some random apartment parking lot. I couldn't believe that Michael had done that to me, but I guess it was good he didn't try to force me to go inside with him. I called my brother again, who still hadn't texted me back, and luckily, he actually picked up the phone. He said that he had just gotten off of work early and could get me. I walked to the end of the apartment complex parking lot and waited. About 10 minutes later, my brother showed up. I was able to get home safely that night, and after that, I didn't bother to report Michael to work or anything. I didn't want to make a big deal out of the situation, and I figured that I would just try to stay as far away from Michael as I could and never talk to him again. And that was going well at first, but only for about a week. Then, one night, I got off of work kind of late again. This time, I had my dad coming to pick me up, but I had to wait for him. So I walked outside of the Walmart and stood around on the sidewalk. Things were pretty quiet around the Walmart, and the parking lot was also quiet at this time. Maybe 5 minutes into waiting, I noticed a truck driving to the front. It was Michael's truck. He stopped right in front of me. Then he rolled down the window and asked me if I needed a ride. I said no. Michael said he would give me a ride to my place this time. I said no again, and added that my dad was already on his way. Michael didn't answer, but rolled his window back up. But he didn't drive away like I thought he would. Instead, I heard his driver's door open and saw him start to walk around the vehicle in my direction. I walked right back inside the Walmart and didn't stop. I went down a few random aisles until I realized that Michael was not following me. Then I went straight to a manager and reported the whole thing. Michael was gone at that point though. My dad arrived a short time later and I got a ride home with him. The next time that I worked, a few days later, I found out that Michael had been fired. I was glad, and luckily, after that, I never saw him again. This is something that happened a couple of years ago. One of my good friends is a guy named Drew. We grew up together and have been friends since we were kids. So, at the time of this story, Drew had just recently got married to his wife, Jennifer. I remember that after they got married, they bought this house a little bit out in the country. It wasn't really that far away, maybe 20 minutes, but it was farther away from the city than I had ever lived, same with Drew. Both of us grew up in a much more populated area. They wanted more space, and the property has a really big yard, and much of it is wooded. I remember shortly after moving there, Drew invited me out to his place to check it out. When I got there, I was very impressed. They still had to get more furniture because it was a much bigger house than the apartment they had before. The yard was especially cool though, because the house was not even that close to any neighbors at all, and the woods was very large. There had been paths in the woods, but they hadn't been maintained in many years. So some of the paths were okay, and others were completely covered in tall grass and other plants and stuff. Drew wanted to show me the woods, so we walked out there. He said his plan was to buy a couple of four-wheelers and restore the paths. Then he could drive them through the woods. It seemed cool to me, and we went out to investigate the shape of the paths and mark off some points that had to be cleared. We ended up going pretty far out. I didn't realize just how big the woods was. We had been walking for quite a while, and the paths around this point were very covered. But that's when I first noticed somebody else was out there. I just remember randomly looking over to the left, and a far distance away, I saw a man walking. The man was seemingly just walking through the middle of the forest. This seemed really odd. I asked Drew if there were any neighbors' properties close by. He said no, and their property was the only one on the street with a large woods. I told him that I saw a man walking a distance away. By now, the guy was out of sight. I had only seen him for a moment before he was not in view anymore. Drew said that nobody should be out here, and this was his land, and he was 100% sure of that. We walked a little ways back to try to see where the man had gone, but we had no luck. The guy was so far away, and there were so many things in between us. Drew then called out asking if anybody was there, but got no response. We both just hoped that maybe it was a neighbor who for some reason wandered into his yard. Honestly, we had no clue, but we knew the guy wasn't supposed to be there. I thought that the guy would leave when he realized we were out in the woods though. So we continued to find the path locations and were marking them off by sticking markers in the ground. About 20 minutes later, we walked around this corner and we heard a noise behind us. We both looked back and saw the man. He crossed the path from one wooded part to another. He was probably almost 100 feet away. When we saw him, he quickly disappeared into dense woods. Drew yelled at him though, and we both started going in his direction. Drew yelled that this was private property and the man had to leave. We got to the location on the path where the man had crossed, and we looked into the woods where he had gone. The man never replied to Drew though, and we no longer saw or heard any sign of him. He would have enough time to be a good distance away by now. Drew yelled one more thing, saying that if he saw him again, he was calling the cops. After that, we continued on. Still, by this point, we were both very suspicious of seeing the man. We wrapped up and then decided to go back to Drew's house. We were probably at least a 15-minute walk from getting out of the woods, and I would say about 10 minutes later, when we were maybe 5 minutes from being out of the woods, there was another noise behind us. We looked, and the man was there again. This time, he came out of the woods onto the path and was walking towards us. Drew and I both just took off running. For some reason, I just had a feeling this guy was dangerous. Clearly, he was not listening to Drew and not bothered with the threat of police. We ran all the way out of the woods and into the rest of Drew's yard. Then we went inside and Drew called the police. When the cops got out to his property, they searched a little bit of the woods. However, the man was never found. Somehow, he was able to elude the police. I went home after that and was honestly glad that I didn't live there. I kept up with Drew and he updated me on things. He said that the man never returned, at least not that he was aware of. Drew still lives there with Jennifer, and I've been to their house several times. He was able to complete the paths for his four-wheelers in the woods. Luckily, he has not seen the man at all. We never found out who the guy was or what he was doing there in the woods. I have a crazy experience from when I lived with this one girl years ago. It was a year after I graduated from college, and I shared a small house with this girl named Leah. We had gone to college together, so we knew each other, but I wouldn't say that we were friends, more so just acquaintances. When I lived with her, we got along okay, but we still didn't really do anything together. We mostly just kept to ourselves. The lease was for 1 year, and during the year we worked our jobs mostly, and here and there would talk to each other. Overall, it was not too bad living there. The neighborhood was okay, and there were never any problems, until very late when there was less than a month left on the lease. I had some money saved up and was planning to move into a little bit nicer place, probably an apartment. Leah was planning to do the same, but we were not going to be roommates. So I remember that one night I was up late and in my bedroom. I just remember that all of a sudden I was hearing like there were people in the house. My bedroom door was closed, so I couldn't hear things in other rooms that great, but I thought that it was strange. I was going to get up to see, and I heard the sound of Leah scream for a very short time. The next thing that I knew, my bedroom door was opening up, and I saw 3 men wearing all black. They each had masks on, so I couldn't tell anything about what they looked like. It was a terrifying sight. The men just walked right into my room and started going through all my stuff. They motioned for me to stand in the corner of the room, so I did. Very quickly, they picked up a bunch of my things, and some of them they just tossed back down. They ended up taking my laptop, phone, wallet, some jewelry, and a few other items. After that, they put them in bags and left the room probably 2 or 3 minutes after entering. Then they walked over towards Leah's bedroom and the rest of the house. We didn't really have that much other stuff. The men then took a few more things and left, and were gone probably not more than 5 minutes after I had noticed them. It was so fast, but I didn't know what to do or what was going on. I was just glad that we were okay. But then I realized that all our stuff had been stolen. Leah said that the men took her phone and wallet as well. and we only had our cell phones, so we had to go to a neighbor's house and ask them to call the police. The cops came out and we told them how we had been robbed. They took down information and said that they would look around the area. The men were long gone though. I didn't see what kind of car they were in or anything. I was not sure how they entered the house, but I figured the door must have been left unlocked, which I know I didn't do, but Leah claimed that she locked it as well. After that, I had to go get a new phone and tried to get a new license and everything else as well. It was a big hassle because everything was gone. My laptop, all my credit cards, everything. It took several days to get things in order again. Plus, I had to get my new apartment very shortly. Well, over the final couple of weeks that I lived with Leah, I found something strange. She still had her laptop, and I was surprised that the men didn't steal it. She said it was because it had been under a blanket on her bed, and she just got lucky. I believed that, but I remember that I called the police department several times in the days after I got another phone. I wanted to see how their investigation was going, but Leah told me to just let it go because the stuff will never get found. I was surprised that she wouldn't want to catch whoever did it as much as I did. Well, I remember that I got my apartment a few days before the lease of our house ended, so I moved all my stuff and moved into the apartment. However, I still had my keys to the house and I was going to come by the final day that we had it and do some cleaning. Apparently Leah was unaware of this, because when I pulled up to the house, I remember seeing another car in the driveway that I didn't recognize. I parked across the street and didn't get out of my car right away. I saw 3 men then get out of the car and walk up to the door with several backpacks, where Leah met them and let them in the house. Obviously, I couldn't confirm those were the same 3 men from the robbery because I didn't see their faces, but this still seemed pretty incriminating. I stayed in the car. Within 2 or 3 minutes, the men walked out of the house without any backpacks. When they left, I walked in. I questioned Leah who the guys were, and she seemed surprised that I knew, but she said they were just old friends. I accused her of setting up the robbery, which she denied and tried to kick me out of the house. I went straight to the police, and my theory ended up being right. The police were already onto the guys because they had tried to sell my laptop to a pawn shop nearby. The pawn shop didn't take it though because they could tell that it was stolen. Within a few days, the men were caught, and Leah admitted to letting them in the house and faking the whole thing. I was really the only person who got robbed. She was willing to do all that just to get about $3,000 worth of my stuff. I will never have another roommate again unless it's somebody who I personally know really good. This is the story of the time that I got a job from Craigslist. Years ago, when I was in college, I hardly had any money. I was really busy, and I remember during the summer one year I got this internship, but I didn't get paid anything for it. I was living with my parents, so I didn't have too many expenses, but I still wanted to have a little bit of money. I couldn't get a job because I didn't have enough time in my schedule. But that gave me the idea to look on Craigslist for something that I could do on a weekend sometime. I knew that there were people who would pay money for you to do yard work for them or something. And yard work was exactly the type of thing that I was looking for. I was pretty confident in my skills, and after looking on Craigslist for a couple of days, I saw an ad that interested me. It was a man who said he needed somebody to do quite a bit of work on his property. The job would take several hours at least, but he was willing to pay good money for it. And the guy also said that there was potential that he would need work done again another time. The ad did not have a specific day, but said to contact him for more information. So I reached out, and pretty quickly I got a response. We arranged a meeting of basically a job interview at a local restaurant. The man's name was Robert, and he seemed to be a nice guy. He said that he owned several houses in the general area. Some he was fixing up to sell, and others to rent. He recently bought a house that needed a lot of yard work done to the property. He said that if I wanted, he might need me for another property in the future as well. The man asked me what day I would be available to work, and I told him. So he gave me the address of the house and said that I could have the job. When the date we agreed on several days later came, I drove to the house and got there when I was supposed to. Robert was not there, but he was at another one of his properties. He said that when I was almost done working to text him and he would come by and pay me. Then I started work. The property of the house was a little bit out there in the country. I was supposed to mow the grass, do some weeding, pick up all the tree branches and stuff in the yard, and then plant a bunch of these flowers that the guy had. The yard was pretty large in both the front and backyard, and at the end of the backyard was a large woods. I'm not sure if that was still his property or not, but I believe at least part of it was. It was definitely a lot of work, but I didn't mind it too much. About an hour in, when I was mowing the grass on the guy's riding mower, I saw something off. I was in the backyard and a good distance away from the house, but I saw what looked like a man staring at me from inside a window to the house. It really took me by surprise, because I was under the impression that the house was empty. I thought that maybe someone was renting the place or something like that. As I kept mowing, I looked over a few more times. When I got a little closer, the man suddenly moved away from the window. I didn't get a good look at him, but later on, I remember that I was mowing in the front and I saw him again. He was once more staring in my direction. When we made eye contact, he didn't move away this time. Instead, he continued to stare at me. I had to look away because it was really weird. I tried to just ignore it though. Soon I finished with the lawn and then went on to the gardening. Once more though, as I was doing this, I noticed the guy staring at me. Not too long after that time, I remember that I got a call from the owner of the house. He was just asking me how things were going and said that he would come by in a little bit. I said that it was going good, but then I decided to ask him if somebody was renting the house. The man said no, the house was currently vacant. I told him how there was a guy inside that kept staring at me. The man told me that he was going to call the police, and he was also going to come over as soon as he could. He recommended that I go to my car and wait in there until the police arrive. I took his advice, and I stopped working and went to my car. I was parked on the side of the street out front, and I kept looking to the windows but no longer saw the man. About 10 minutes later, the police arrived, followed by the homeowner about 2 minutes after that. He opened up the house for the police, and they went inside. About 10 minutes later, they came out and said that the place was empty. The man must have left. I was very confused because I hadn't seen him leave, so it had to be out the back. Robert went inside and said that he saw evidence that somebody else had been there. I didn't go in the house, so I don't know if something was stolen or what, but I was glad that he didn't think I was crazy or making it up. The police looked around the front and backyard briefly and then left. Before Robert left though, he said that he trusted that I would finish and he paid me. I was in fact going to finish, so I stayed there and I continued gardening. I was almost done, and it took me only like 20 or 30 more minutes to finish. When I was done, I was taking the weeds and tossing them in the woods like I was supposed to. As I approached the entrance of the woods, I saw the man again. He was standing pretty deep in the woods, partly behind a tree. I'm not sure if he knew that I saw him or not. I tried to play it off and I calmly walked away. I was really glad that I was done with work. I quickly went to my car and then left. I called Robert and told him that the guy was back. After that, I went home. I'm not sure who that guy was or how he got into the house, but that was a really creepy experience. This story happened way back in the day. I was about 12 years old or so, and I remember that I used to sometimes go on the computer. This was the early 2000s, and we had a desktop in the corner of the living room. Mostly I would play games on it, but I would also go on the internet and play games or go on websites for kids or teens. One time when I was at a friend's house, she showed me a chat room where she would talk with random people. We had a fun time just messing around and talking to people, making jokes and stuff. So one time when I was at home, I was bored later at night and I went into a chat room. I don't even remember exactly what the website was, but I entered the chat room and I started talking with random people. Nobody in the chat room could see anybody else. I remember that I started talking with this one person. I don't remember everything in the conversation that was said because it was so long ago, but I'm pretty sure that there was just some basic talk in the beginning. Then I remember that the person asked me where I lived. I told the person the state and city that I lived in. The person asked me where in the city. I didn't give out the exact address, but I gave a little bit more specific detail. I know this sounds really stupid, but this was a long time ago. There was no social media back then, and I was also very young. I didn't really think that it was that bad or that anything would happen. We talked a little longer, but this person started to ask me some weird questions. At that point, I decided to leave. I was feeling kind of creeped out. I went off the website and then I started playing some games instead. After a while of that, I got tired and I went to bed. The very next night, I found myself in a similar situation. It was later at night and I was still awake. My parents were asleep, so I was the only one that was still up. I remember that I went onto the computer again. I did not go to a chat room though. I was on some website where you can play mini games and stuff. Out of nowhere, I remember I heard the sound like somebody was walking up to the front door. The door happened to be just a few feet away from the computer where I was. I looked over, but you couldn't really see anything out of the small window at the top of the door. Instantly, I was a little bit scared. I knew that it was really late at night, and probably nobody should be at our door at this hour. I was expecting somebody to knock on the door, but they didn't. I just sat there and listened, but heard nothing more. After probably about a minute, I decided to get up and look. I walked out into the living room and carefully went over to the window. Then I moved the window shade and looked out. When I did, I saw that there was this random man standing on the front step. I did not know who he was or why he was at our house. I moved away from the window in case he would have somehow looked over and seen me. I went back over to the computer. That's when the man tried opening the door, which was thankfully locked. After a few minutes, there was a light knocking at the door. It was very quiet. This was really strange. It was almost like he knew that I was near the door or right on the other side. He only knocked that one time though. Then things were silent for a while. After probably like 5 minutes, I went back to the window and I looked again. When I did, the man was gone. I was wondering still who this guy was and why he was there. Shortly after, I remembered the guy from the chat room and how he had asked me where I lived. Could this have been him? I decided to go back to the website. I logged back in and looked at the conversation that we had. I noticed that after I had left the conversation, he sent me a message saying, "I'm going to come to your house." That was the last thing that was said in the chat. I quickly logged back out, and I was too scared to go back there. After that night, the guy thankfully never returned. I don't know how he found me, but it really gives me the creeps to think about it. One time, I was driving down a road late at night. It was a quiet road with no other cars in sight, and I was on my way home. I remember that I randomly saw this woman standing on the side of the road up ahead. It wasn't like in front of a driveway or anything, and she seemed very much out of place. As I approached, I slowed down because she was standing within just a few feet of the lane that I was driving in. When I got closer though, she actually started to walk out into the street and waved at me. It was not a frantic wave, but she clearly wanted me to stop. So I slowed down and then came to a stop just in front of her. She walked around to my driver's window and I rolled it down. I asked the woman if she was okay, and she said that she really needed a ride. I then asked her what she was doing out here at this hour, but she kind of blew off my question. Instead, she just said that she only needed a ride a few miles up and asked if I could take her. I said yes because I didn't really have a problem with it. That was the direction that I was headed, so I told her to get into my passenger side. After she did, I asked her where exactly she was going. The woman said just a few miles up the road again, but didn't give an exact destination. I just thought whatever and started driving. We mostly drove in silence for the next few miles. Then the woman told me to turn right at an upcoming road, so I did. I figured that she lived over there. It was an even quieter road than the previous one that we had been on. After driving that way, I was told to take a left at the next road. I did, and this road was now surrounded by woods on both sides. I was driving slowly down this very quiet road, and then randomly the woman told me to stop right there. I was very confused. There were no houses or buildings, it was just woods. She said that she would get out there and thanked me for the ride, but I asked her why she wanted me to stop there. She just said that's where she wanted to get out. I asked if there was a reason why she was getting out there, but she just opened up the door at that point. But before she left my car, she asked if I could come out and help her real quick. I asked with what, and she just told me to get out of the car. By now, I was thinking that this whole thing was really sketchy. I was regretting even giving her a ride in the first place. I told her to get out of my car. The woman then raised her voice and yelled at me to get out of the car now. I said no, and I hit the gas pedal and started driving. The woman then started literally screaming at me to stop the car over and over. I did not. I kept driving for at least 100 yards or so. Then I pulled over and I yelled at her to get out of my car. At that point, she finally did. She cursed at me several times before leaving the car and walking away. Then I quickly drove out of there. I'm pretty sure that the woman was setting me up to get robbed or something. I called the police after and reported everything. I'm glad that I didn't get out of the car where she wanted me to. Hopefully, nobody else fell for her tricks. Last year, I went to McDonald's one evening. You see, I work from home and I live in an apartment building. One day, I had a lot of work to get done. However, sometime in the afternoon, when I still had a lot to do, my Wi-Fi cut out. I don't know why it happened, but after resetting things and trying to figure it out for a long time, I lost my patience. It still wasn't working, and there's a McDonald's just down the street from my apartment complex. It's so close that I can easily walk there, which I've done before several times late at night. Anyways, I took my laptop and left my place to walk to the McDonald's. I was hoping to use their free Wi-Fi and be able to get the work done that I needed. When I got inside, the restaurant was not very busy, which was nice. I set up at a booth in the back corner and was able to successfully connect to the Wi-Fi. I ordered a coffee and later on a little food, and I worked hard. Over the next few hours, I was able to get the work done that I needed to, and over time, the McDonald's got quieter and quieter as the night wore on. By about 9 o'clock, I was done with my work, and I was the only customer in the entire restaurant. They stayed open past midnight, but I decided to leave then and go home. So I packed up my laptop, and I headed out to walk back to my apartment. When I stepped outside, one of the first things I noticed was there was a man standing around sort of by the doors. He was wearing a sweatshirt with a hood and looking down. I glanced over, but turned and walked in the opposite direction. When I did, he almost immediately started walking after me, which got my attention. As I continued to walk, I noticed that the man started to trail me by about 30 feet or so. I then got onto the sidewalk and just hoped that this man was not actually following me. After walking down the sidewalk for a bit, I looked behind me. I saw the man, still there and still about the same distance away. He was looking down, so I could not see his face. This was becoming more and more suspicious. As I approached my apartment complex, I did not want to let this man into my building, assuming that he was in fact following me. So I started to walk faster and faster. After making it to my apartment complex, I looked back and saw that the man was still about the same distance away. He must have walked faster as well. This was not good. I walked down the sidewalk inside of my complex, and I decided that I would not go through the front door. Instead, I walked towards my building like I was going to go past it. Then, at the last moment, I turned to the right and went to the side of it. There, it had a less used side door. I walked really fast, got to the side door, and I knew that I had one shot to use my fob to unlock it. Luckily, I got it right away, and I quickly opened the door and went inside. Then, as fast as I could, I closed it behind me. Right after the door closed, the man appeared right there and tried opening it. He couldn't get in. And clearly he didn't live there, because if he did, he would have had a key. It confirmed to me all my fears of the guy following. I felt grateful to be inside safely, and I wasted no time and I went upstairs to my unit on the second floor. When I got inside, I went to my bedroom window and I looked out. I saw the guy still standing there in the grass. He looked up at me and then flipped me off. I closed my blinds and I hoped to never see the guy again. And luckily, since then, I haven't. I had a really crazy situation when I was shopping at Walmart just a few weeks ago. I went there sort of late at night to buy a couple of things. I didn't really want to go, but I knew that I would be busy the next day. So I drove to the Walmart, which thankfully isn't too far from my place. I parked my car in the parking lot, which was more empty than I was expecting. I parked sort of on the side, but still in front of the store. I got out of my car and walked through the parking lot to go in, And when I did, I noticed that there was this one random car parked a little closer to the store than I was, and I passed it by. There were at least 3 people inside of the car and it was running, but aside from that, I didn't really pay much attention. I went inside of Walmart and walked around the store shopping and getting the things that I needed. It was really dead inside, and so I was able to shop pretty quickly. It probably took me less than 5 minutes to get everything that I needed. Then I went up to a self-checkout, paid for everything, and left. So I walked out of the Walmart to go back to my car at this point. Not long after I made it out of the store, I noticed something. There was a man at my car, and the passenger side door was open. He was looking inside of my vehicle. I didn't know how this happened or why, but I quickly started running over to my car. I yelled at the man, saying that was my car. When I got about halfway there, he suddenly stopped and looked at me. Then he took off running in another direction. I reached my car and then saw the man run to the other car that had been running in the parking lot. He got inside the back seat and the car quickly squealed away. Now I went around and got into my car. I looked over and saw that my glove box as well as the center console were open. There were random things on the floor and passenger seat which had been in them, but I didn't really have anything that valuable in my car, which was good. So I got inside and was about to call the police when I heard a noise from behind me. I looked, and there was another man in the back seat of my car on the passenger side. He was ducked down and almost hidden from my sight. When I saw him, I quickly opened my door and left my car. I ran all the way to the Walmart front doors and then called the police. I watched my car from there, and at first, the man didn't get out. Then, after maybe a minute, he opened up the back door and sprinted away to the side of the Walmart building and out of my view. At that point, I walked back out of the Walmart and went to my car again. This time, I got in, checked it for any more people, and luckily there was no one else. Then I locked the doors and waited for the cops to get there. In the meantime, when I was waiting, I was constantly looking around. I noticed at the side of the parking lot, I saw the guy again. He was really far away and walking. Then the car which I had seen before entered the parking lot going really fast. It then stopped, and the man who had been inside my car got inside of it. The car then sped away, once more screeching the tires when it left. After that, they quickly went out of sight. The police arrived just a few moments later. I told them everything I could, giving a description of the man as well as their vehicle. After that, I went home. I don't know if those men were ever located. Way back when I was like 17, I think, I worked at a Toys R Us store. This was back when they were pretty popular and not going out of business yet. It was a typical store, and I had gotten the job because my mom's friend was the manager. When I worked there, it was pretty nice. We usually weren't that busy unless it was a weekend, and I mostly just worked as a cashier. But one time when I was working, something really creepy happened. It was early in my shift, and things were pretty quiet. I was the only cashier that was open at the time, and I think we had 2 other people working. I'm not sure exactly where they were, probably in the back organizing things or stocking a shelf. Things would often be very quiet earlier in the day, but then would get busy in the afternoon. On this day, I recall a customer came in the store and started to shop. It was a man, and he quickly went out of my sight, but not long after this, I saw him approaching and I thought he was maybe going to check out. But instead, he came up to me and asked me where the Hot Wheels were. I tried telling him the aisle, but he asked if I could just show him. I didn't really want to leave the check lanes unoccupied, but because not that many people were there, I did. I walked over and showed the man where they were, but when we got there, he started asking me more questions. I answered a few, but I soon told him that I really had to get back to the registers because nobody else was there. Then I walked back. I didn't quite know where my coworkers were, but I let the man know that there should be somebody else he can ask for help. I got back to the registers, and thankfully nobody was waiting or anything. Some time went by, and I noticed just a few people shopping from what parts of the store that I could see. After maybe 10 or 15 minutes, this one woman came up to me. She told me that some guy had been following her around the store. When she described him, I realized that it was the same man that I had talked to. Apparently, He had been closely following her, and when she asked him to leave her alone, he did not. This continued until the woman threatened to call the police, and apparently he finally backed off. She told me that she had just called the police and she wanted to let me know. The woman then waited with me until the police arrived, and in that time, I remember noticing the man quickly walking out of the store. Not long after, the police got there. They spoke with me and the woman, and then they left because the man did. I thought they were going to look around for him. After that, things pretty much went back to normal. Soon, things got busier, and another coworker joined me at the check lanes. I was kept pretty busy until several hours later, before close. When it was nighttime, things got really quiet again. Once more, it went back to me being the only cashier, and the store being very calm. I had some downtime where I was just waiting for people to check out. It was during this time that I noticed the man from earlier entering the store. I could not believe it. I wasn't sure if I should call the police right then and there or what, but instantly the man started walking in my direction. Surprisingly, he came right up to me and then asked me how much longer I had until I was off. I didn't really know what to do. I told the man I was working until close. He then started asking me a few more things, but the next thing I knew, I remember a coworker started to approach. When the man saw her, he just ran away and went farther into the store into a random aisle. I guess she had been there before when he had been stalking the other woman. After seeing him, my coworker started to chase after the guy. I then called the police and reported him for being back in the store. My coworker came back a short time later, asking me if the man had left. He had not, so we assumed that he was hiding someplace inside the store. The police got there quickly, and we told them that we thought the guy was hiding someplace. They looked around, and were able to find him within probably 10 minutes. He had in fact been hiding in the store. He ended up getting banned from the Toys R Us. That was by far the craziest thing that ever happened when I worked there. I had a really creepy experience when buying something on Craigslist a few years ago. It all started when I was trying to look for a new TV. I should have just went to the store and bought one, but I was trying to get a deal, so I looked on Craigslist for some used TVs. You can usually get them for significantly less money, and most of the time they work great. So after looking for only like 30 minutes, I found one that I was sure I wanted to buy. I contacted the seller and was told that the TV was available and I could come and buy it the next night. The seller was a man named Joe and told me to come by at 9 p.m. So I got the cash and then the next night drove to his house. He lived just a few minutes away, but in a different neighborhood. I parked on the side of the road across the street from his house. Then I walked up his driveway and then to his front door. I decided to text him that I was there before knocking on the door though, so I texted Joe that I had arrived. Then I stood there just off the front step and looked around. When I was doing so, I noticed something through the living room window. There was a man looking out of it towards me. I only saw him for a moment before he disappeared. I figured that it was Joe, but moments later, I received a text from him. He said that he was not home, but he would arrive back in a couple of minutes. He said that I could wait right outside. I was confused, but then figured the guy in the house maybe also lived there or something. But to be honest, I was a little bit suspicious, so I just stood around the front step and waited like Joe asked me to. A couple of minutes went by. I was just casually standing there, looking around. I didn't see the guy in the window anymore, but I soon heard what sounded like the back door to the house opening and closing. I couldn't confirm it because I could barely hear it, but that's what it sounded like. I figured whoever I had seen might have gone out back, but still, I was just waiting for Joe to get back. A couple more minutes went by. I was still there and starting to get impatient. I looked at my phone, but there was no new notifications or anything. Then, all of a sudden, I heard this noise behind me. I looked back, and I saw this man walking out from behind a large tree not far away from me in the front yard. I was pretty sure that this was the same guy I had seen looking out the window at me. He saw me, and he was not at all approaching me in a friendly way like to greet me. Before I could even ask what was going on though, I saw the guy start to lunge towards me. I quickly moved away and then just ran. It was really all out of instincts and just a reaction. I sprinted away through the front yard as the man actually chased after me. I sprinted for my car, running as fast as I possibly could. Thankfully, I was able to make it. I got inside and closed and locked the door behind me. Moments later, the man got to my car. He tried opening the door, and I was busy starting the engine at that point. He banged on the window like twice before I hit the gas and sped away, leaving him standing there in the street. I got out of that neighborhood and was so confused that I didn't even know what was going on. I drove back to my house, and on the drive, I was able to calm down. When I got back, I looked at my phone and had no new calls or texts. That's when I realized that Joe was probably the same person who tried to attack me, and he was looking at me through the window. The whole thing must have been some kind of a setup. Why? I'm not exactly sure. I ended up going back on Craigslist to look for the listing so that I could report it, but it was gone. Joe also blocked me. I still reported it to Craigslist, and I also notified police. Hopefully Joe didn't try to scam anybody else. I'm really glad that I got out of that situation safely. I had recently moved into a new house. The house was in a nice area, but surrounded by rather sketchy neighborhoods. The previous person who lived there left behind a lot of stuff, and I finally decided to list some of the things to try to get rid of them because I needed the space. One of the things I had listed was a 20-inch flat screen TV that was like 10 years old. I only wanted $20 for it, but I mostly just wanted it gone. I had previous strange experiences selling things on Facebook Marketplace, so I already didn't like selling things this way as it was, but I didn't feel like going to a pawn shop or anything, since I probably wouldn't get anything for it there. So I listed the TV on Facebook Marketplace, including a picture of it turned on. I also specifically stated that this was a cash-only sale. In an hour, I got a message from a guy named James. He said, "Hi, is this still available?" I replied saying, "Yes, it is." Then he said, "I want to come and pick it up. Is it still available?" I had just said that it was available, so I repeated again, "Yes, it was." Then the guy sent me a message asking if I used Cash App. I was immediately sketchy about this because I now felt like this guy was likely a scammer. I responded, "No, it's cash only sale, as I stated in the description." The guy then asked if I could deliver, to which I said no. I mean, it's a $20 TV, and you seriously want me to deliver it? I was getting a bit annoyed at this point. Then the guy tried offering me $15 since I couldn't deliver it, and I said no, the price is firm, so you can either take it or leave it. The guy didn't message me back for a bit, but later he did and said that he wanted to come and get it, so I messaged him my address, and he said that he was on his way. It was now around 8 p.m., and I had work the next day. I waited in the parlor and was watching out the window, and the guy messaged me saying that he was almost there. I noticed a red Chevy Volt drive back and forth by my house a few times before disappearing, and I asked him if that was him. He didn't reply, and instead sent me an image of a MapQuest showing directions from his location, which was about a mile up the road, to my house. At this point, I was annoyed, and I figured this guy was either casing my house or scamming me, or maybe both. I messaged the guy, "I'm done with you, good night." I then went upstairs, shut off my phone, and got into bed for the night. Around 2 a.m., I awoke to the sound of glass breaking. I thought maybe my cat had knocked something over, so I groggily got up and went out the door and then turned on the hallway light. I also turned on the parlor light before heading downstairs to the parlor. As I got halfway down the stairs, I saw a man in the living room tearing out the TV in the media cabinet. I froze for a moment, then ran upstairs and pressed the panic button on the HMI for my security system, which was right outside my bedroom door. This, of course, set off the alarm on the home. I then went inside my bedroom and closed the door and grabbed the landline off the dresser and called 911. When the police arrived, the man was gone. He had broken the glass on my front door and let himself in, and he had stolen not only the TV I was trying to sell, but also the one in the living room, which was a 10-year-old piece of crap anyways. I remembered my weird experience with the guy on Facebook Marketplace the previous day, and I got my phone out and turned it on to look up the guy's profile. To my horror, a long string of messages awaited me. They read, "Yo, I'm here. Hey, where are you? I want the TV. Well, I guess I'll just have to come in and get it myself," followed by a picture of my front door. I gave all this information to the police, and they left. I also reported what happened to Facebook as well, but I knew they probably wouldn't care. They eventually caught the guy a few days later, after he tried to sell my TVs to a pawn shop. He was charged with breaking and entering, burglary, and some other stuff. He got 15 years in jail from what I was told. After that, I had security cameras installed, and I never sold anything online again. I used to hitchhike when I was younger. This was back in the 90s, and I would hitchhike many places. I did it all over the country, and it was a cheap way to travel. Looking back, it was also a pretty dangerous way to travel, and I can't believe that I even did it as much as I did. Well, I'm going to tell you the story of what made me stop hitchhiking. I was going to go to California to visit some friends. I had already made it more than halfway there, but still had a ways to go. Somebody had just given me a ride to a city that I don't even remember exactly where it was, but I spent a couple of hours there and then was going to try to catch another ride. I stood near a major highway, but next to a road leading to it. Then I waited for somebody to stop. Eventually, this white van pulled over. The man driving told me that he could drive me. I told him where I was going, and he actually said that he was also going to California. I felt extremely lucky at that point. So I got inside of his van, and he told me that I could sit in the back. The man had long hair, and I remember a mustache. It was great to get a ride from him, because there was lots of space in the back of his van. After he started driving, we talked briefly, but not much. Soon, though, I got tired. I had been up since very early in the morning, and eventually I fell asleep. I don't know how long I was asleep for, but I've always been a pretty deep sleeper. Anyways, the next thing I knew, I woke up and the van was stopped. I sat up and looked around. It was still nighttime. The man was no longer driving and wasn't inside at all. I seemed to be the only person in the van. I looked out of the windows of the van to see where we were. It was parked in the driveway of a random house. But when I looked to the house, standing at the front door was the man who had been driving. I saw him talking to someone. Then the front door opened and several men exited the house. They all started walking in my direction. I just had a terrible feeling about it. I quietly went for the side door. I opened it up and I got out. Then I quickly ran down to the end of the driveway and into the next yard. I went down the street until I got to a random nearby house that seemed far enough away. I walked up and knocked on the door. I'm not even sure what time it was, but I got very lucky when the door opened up. When the person opened the door, I asked them to call the police, and thankfully they did. I explained to them what was going on, and I waited there on their front step. I did not see the men coming after me or anything. However, I did see the white van driving off down the road just a minute later. When the cops got there, everybody was gone. I got a ride to a nearby bus stop, and then used public transportation for the rest of my trip. A couple of years ago, I was selling my car on Craigslist. It was about 10 years old, and I had recently gotten a little bit newer car. So I figured that I would be able to sell it on Craigslist because it ran just fine and it was a decent car. I had bought cars on Craigslist in the past and sold a couple there as well, so I was familiar with how the website worked and everything, and I had never had a bad experience. But that all changed. After taking photos, I created the listing and I added lots of information about the car. Within 2 days, I got a text message from a woman who introduced herself to me as Jamie. She asked me if the car was still available, and I said yes. Then she asked me if she would be able to come over and look at it. I said yes again. So after that, we arranged for a meeting for her to come and look at the car the following night. I already had the car out in the driveway and I had cleaned it and everything. So that night, Jamie arrived at the agreed time and came to the door. I went outside and met her and then started showing her the vehicle. She looked around at it and then looked inside of the car as well. I remembered that she sat in the driver's seat, and I asked her if she wanted to take the car for a test drive. She said yes, so I got inside the passenger seat. It was a pretty short test drive though, with Jamie really just driving the car around the block and then going back. After that, she parked back in the driveway and we got out. Jamie told me that she decided that she was not going to buy the car. I said that was fine, and then we said bye to each other. I figured there was something about the car that she didn't like. I just hoped that I would find a buyer eventually. So after that, I just went back inside. Well, hours later, when it was like midnight, I was about to go to bed. However, I was alerted when I thought I heard the sound of a car door opening and closing coming from not that far outside. My neighborhood is typically pretty quiet, so it was unusual to hear things like that. I went over to the living room and looked out of my front window. When I did, I saw this woman standing outside right near my car that I was trying to sell, and upon looking closer, I realized that it appeared to be Jamie. I wasn't sure what she was doing out there. I watched her as she appeared to look around in the windows of the car. She also appeared to try opening one of the doors, which was locked. Then, she walked around to the passenger side of the car, and she was messing around at one of the doors for a while. That's when I decided to ask her what was going on. I opened up the door and shouted to her, asking what she was doing. She looked up at me, startled, and then quickly ran off. She went all the way back to her car, got inside, and quickly drove away. After that, I wasn't really sure what to do. I tried texting her, asking her why she came to my house, but I think she blocked my number because it didn't look like the text went through. After that, I never saw her again. I ended up reporting what happened to Craigslist. Looking back, I don't know if she was trying to steal my car or what, but I'm glad that I saw her when I did. Several years ago, I used to live in this apartment with two other women. Their names were Amanda and Carly. The apartment was kind of crappy, and we lived on the first floor of 2. The front door opened right up to the outside, and the parking lot was in the back of the building. So the three of us met online to get the place, and the apartment had 3 bedrooms, so we each got one. At first, we all got along pretty well, but as time went on, Carly was not a good roommate at all. Amanda was a great roommate. She was friendly and considerate of other people. However, Carly did nothing around the house. She would use our dishes and food and never clean anything up. She would leave things out, and she also never did any other chores around the house. I remember that she would have her boyfriend over a lot as well, and they would have stuff on her TV super loud at all hours of the night. They would also smoke in and out of her room, and it stunk up the whole place. After a couple of months, I remember that I asked her to do her part around the house and be a better roommate. She responded by saying that she pays her share of the rent every month, so she doesn't have to do anything else. It started to become an argument, so I stopped talking to her. I really didn't know what to do. Amanda tried talking to her as well, and was met with pretty much the same result. Sometimes Carly and her boyfriend would be gone for days at a time, which was always nice for us. But overall, she was a terrible roommate, and we didn't like her. One time, when Amanda was gone at work, I had another conversation with Carly. I don't remember what exactly started it, but we ended up arguing about the same old stuff. I know that I was getting on her because she put stuff into the garbage, causing it to overflow, but she didn't take it out, which she never did. Still, she said that she paid the rent so she didn't have to do anything else. Well, I went to take the garbage out to the dumpster myself. When I did, I went around back to the dumpster, and then went back to go inside. When I got to the apartment, the door was locked. I didn't have my keys with me because I was just going to be gone for a minute. I knocked on the door, but Carly didn't answer. Luckily, I did have my phone, and I called her, but she kept declining my calls. I remember that after I called her like 10 times, she finally picked up, just to curse at me and hang up. I couldn't get back into the apartment. Amanda wasn't going to be home for hours, and I didn't know what to do. After trying to get Carly to let me back inside for at least 30 minutes, I called the cops. When they got there, things got somewhat resolved. Carly finally let me back in, and claimed that she didn't hear me, which was a lie because I had all the proof of the phone calls. The police told her that she couldn't lock me out because I was on the lease, and then they left. I was really mad at Carly, obviously. But not too long after this, Carly told Amanda and I that she was going to be staying at her boyfriend's for the rest of the lease. By this point, there were 3 months left of our lease. Amanda and I were both very happy to hear it. So she ended up moving all her stuff out of the apartment and was gone. The next roughly 2 months were great. Carly was technically still on the lease and supposed to pay, but she didn't pay her share of the rent when it came around. Amanda and I were not surprised, and after talking to the landlord, we agreed to pay the amount between us. Apparently, Carly didn't respond to him. We would rather do that than have her living with us. She did still have her keys to the apartment though. Well, sometime later, about 2 months after Carly moved out, none of us had seen her or heard from her since. I remember that I was in my room and up late one night, and Amanda was in her room as well. All of a sudden, I heard the sound of glass breaking coming from the living room. I realized that somebody was breaking in. I stayed in my bedroom, which unfortunately did not have a lock on the door. I was about to call the police when I heard footsteps approaching. Then the door suddenly opened up, and I saw Carly standing there. She asked me why I didn't answer the door, but I never heard her knocking or anything. I asked her why she broke into our apartment because she still had a key. She said she had lost it though. I was really mad that she literally broke our window to get in. She said that she had an argument with her boyfriend and they broke up, so now she was going to move back into the apartment. I told her that she hadn't even paid the rent. She said, "What were they gonna do, evict me? I didn't even live here." I didn't know how to respond. I was just glad that our lease was very close to being over at that point. Carly did end up getting evicted though before the lease ended, for breaking the window as well as not paying her share of the rent. After that, I haven't seen her or talked to her since, and I'm glad. I used to work at a Walmart supercenter several years ago. I only worked there for about 6 months, if that. My job was just stocking shelves, and I often worked really late at night and after the store had closed. It was a job that was pretty easy, so I didn't really mind it that much. But one time, I was working, and the store hadn't quite closed yet. Still, I was stocking shelves in sort of the back middle of the store. It was normally a pretty quiet area, and I was all by myself. About 30 minutes went by, and I hadn't seen anybody at all. At that point, I put in some headphones, which I did all the time. I think the store was closing in like 10 minutes at that particular moment. So I was now listening to my music and stocking the shelves. Not long after this though, I could sense that somebody was behind me. I looked over my shoulder and saw this woman standing there. She was wearing this really creepy looking mask over her face. It wasn't covering her entire head, but just the face, including her eyes. It really freaked me out at first, especially with the music in my ears, so I hadn't heard her approaching. She was like 20 feet away from me. I took my headphones out and laughed, realizing it was probably a joke. I jokingly said that she scared me, but the woman just stood there and did not say anything at all. I then asked if I could help her with something, but she still didn't say anything. So after another awkward moment or two, I said that I was going to get back to stalking, and I did so. A few moments later, I looked back, and the woman was now gone. It was very strange, but I figured that it was just somebody trying to get a reaction out of me. I continued with my work. For probably an hour, I was just working like normal by myself in that area. I moved a couple of aisles over, but was still in the same general location. And that area was still very quiet. Then, I remember I randomly turned around again and saw that the woman was back. Now this was really weird, because we were closed now and had been for well over an hour. I couldn't believe that I saw her once more. She was just standing there like before, and I asked her what she was doing here. I said that the store was closed. Of course, the woman didn't say anything at all. She then picked up a random item off the shelf and threw it at me. It hit me and I stood up. She picked up something else and tossed that at me too. I didn't know what was going on. I just left the aisle out the back way and walked quickly to try to find another coworker. When I did this, I heard the woman walking after me. I headed to the front of the store, and at that point, I lost her. I found my manager and told her about the woman, and she radioed to somebody else. Before I knew it, the police got called, and they entered the store and searched for the woman. Apparently, this lady had also done the same thing to another coworker. Eventually, the police were able to locate her and get her to leave the store. After that, we all went back to work. That was my craziest experience working at Walmart. "20 years ago, I was living in New Jersey, and I worked as a pizza delivery driver. I worked at this neighborhood joint called Domino's. The shop was at this corner on the edge of town. The area would be pretty busy during the day, but not so much at night. Obviously, we were open pretty late with it being a pizza shop. One time, I was working until 2 a.m. At about 1 o'clock in the morning, there was a delivery for me to make. I was sitting inside the shop, and I left out the back door to go to my car. I parked in the small lot behind the place, which was where employees would park. So I walked out the back door, and as soon as I did, I saw this guy standing near my car outside. He started moving away, and I asked him what he was doing. The guy quickly moved behind a couple of dumpsters that were back there. He had gone out of sight as quickly as I had seen him. I figured that he had left the property and went into the alley behind the dumpsters. I just know that I couldn't see him anymore. I went to my car and didn't notice anything out of place. I went inside my car with the pizza and then left to make the delivery. I was able to do so without a problem. After getting back from the delivery, I went back inside. A while later, I got my next delivery to be made. I left through the back door again. This time when I left, I did not see anybody by my vehicle, but when I was walking towards it, about halfway there, and I heard footsteps behind me, I looked back and noticed the same guy. He was walking in my direction. I went faster and got inside my car with the pizza. The guy kept going towards my car quickly. I thought that he was either going to try to get in my car or talk to me, and the way he had been at my car earlier made him seem really suspicious. He got within a couple of feet of me, but did not try opening my door or knocking on my window. He just kind of stood there. I didn't wait around to see what he wanted, and I started up my engine and quickly left. I went out and made the next delivery. I was gone for probably about 15 minutes or so. Then I went back to work again and parked in my usual spot. After getting out of my car, I was starting to walk back to the back door, but I quickly noticed that the man was still there. He came out from behind a nearby vehicle of a coworker. He was then standing near the back door to the place. I didn't know what he wanted, and I decided to walk away. Instead of going to the back door like I usually did, I went around on the edge of the parking lot. I then walked around to the front door, which was locked by now. I rang the bell, and a coworker saw me and unlocked the door. I quickly went inside and told them about the sketchy guy. We ended up calling the police to report him, and nobody left the store until they arrived. They checked out the area, but the man had gone by then, I guess, because they couldn't find him. After a while, they left. I got another delivery that night and didn't see him at all. That was the creepiest thing that ever happened when I worked there. This happened back when I was a kid, about 10 or 12 years old. So I lived with my parents and had my own bedroom. One night, like any other, I went to sleep. I just remember that out of nowhere, in the middle of the night, I was woken up. At first, I was really confused, but soon I heard a noise. It sounded like somebody was knocking on my bedroom window. When I heard this, I was really creeped out and also scared. So much so that I was too scared to look. I covered myself with the blankets on my bed, and I tried to ignore it. After maybe a minute or two, I heard the noise of somebody knocking on the window again. I was terrified. I kept laying there in bed, too scared to do anything. Finally, after maybe 2 or 3 more minutes without hearing the sound, I felt a little bit better. I was thinking somebody had to be knocking on my window, but I had never looked to that point. So finally, I turned over and I looked towards the window. When I did, I saw nobody there. This made me feel even better. I was trying to convince myself that maybe there was another explanation for the sound. Then I got up from my bed and I walked over to the window to look out of it. When I did, I noticed something. By the street, just barely in our front yard, there was a man dressed up as Ronald McDonald. He had the face paint and everything, and it was spot on. I was so confused and also creeped out at the same time. As I stared at him from my window, he was not looking at me at first. I noticed him walking very slowly and taking small steps. He then stopped and looked over at me and started to wave. I instantly ran away from my window and bolted to my parents' room. I woke them up in a panic and I told them everything. When they got up and looked though, the guy was gone. We stayed up for a while and he did not return. Before going back to bed though, I took a blanket and covered my window with it, taping it up. I did not want to even look out of it. After that night, nothing else like it happened again. I'm still creeped out thinking back to it. It was so random and creepy. This happened just a few weeks ago. I was driving one morning, and I was surprised to see a hitchhiker. He was standing on the side of the road, not too far from my apartment. I remember noticing him because I really never see hitchhikers. Obviously, I did not stop and give him a ride, and I kept going. But the very next day, I found myself driving really late at night. I was in the same general area, but a different spot. I saw a hitchhiker again. I'm pretty sure that it was the same guy, although I can't confirm that. It's not like I got a great look and memorized what the man looked like the day before, but just based on the fact that I saw a hitchhiker 2 days in a row, tells me that it was. So anyways, by this time the roads were extremely quiet. Hardly anyone else was out. I was less than 10 minutes from home. When I was approaching the hitchhiker guy, he started walking out into the road. I got a bad feeling, because it looked like he was going to try to make me stop. I slowed down and went into the oncoming traffic lane, which was obviously empty. When I did though, the man kept walking, and he too went into that lane. So now I had to basically completely stop. I went back to the right, and so did the guy. I stopped and then rolled down my window and said that I could not give him a ride. He started to say something, but then I turned my wheel to the left and started slowly driving. The man did not run out in front of my car again. He sort of walked in that direction, but I was able to safely get around him. I started to continue down the road, feeling like I possibly avoided a bad situation. I noticed headlights in my mirror, seemingly out of nowhere. There was another car on the road, and I saw the hitchhiker guy walking out into the road again. I noticed that this car was stopping for him, and I was just able to see him getting inside the car before they basically were out of my sight because I was driving far enough away. I guessed that whoever was behind me had decided to stop and give the guy a ride. So I kept going, but the car behind me soon caught up with me and started basically riding my tail. This was kind of strange. When I had to turn at an upcoming street, I did, but the car behind me did as well. After continuing to drive very close behind me, I wondered if they were following me. Well, it kept going for the rest of the drive home. They were in fact following me, and obviously I could not go back to my apartment. It was at that moment when I remembered to drive to the police, so I did exactly that. It took me almost 10 minutes to go to the nearest police station. The car behind me followed the entire way, right until the end. Then it went someplace else. I ended up reporting what happened. I have not seen the guy or been followed since. I'm hoping that I never see him again.
Back when I was poor and in college, I used to sometimes look on Craigslist to see what people were giving away for free. Most of it was junk, or stuff that I didn't want, but occasionally there would be good things there. I actually once got a pretty decent TV for free, as well as a couple of other pieces of furniture, so I would just go on here and there and look around. It was casual, and I certainly wasn't expecting to find something every time that I went on. But one day when I went on the free stuff, I saw a listing that had literally just been posted like 5 minutes prior. It was an ad for a MacBook laptop for free. At first, I thought that it was one of those scams, where somebody lists something for free, but when you actually click on it, the description says that it's like $5,000 or whatever. So when I clicked on the ad, the person said that it was actually free. They said that it worked fine, and mentioned something about because of their job they had a bunch of laptops. It was not the newest MacBook, but about 5 years old. This made it seem more legitimate to me. Still, this was an amazing opportunity, it seemed. And I know what you're saying, it's way too good to be true. But to me, it was worth reaching out and asking. So I quickly texted the number listed, and I asked if the laptop was still available and said that I would like to get it if it was. Within a minute or so, the number responded saying that it was. They asked me for my name, and I told them. About an hour or so later, they responded again with an address, saying that I could come and pick it up that night at about 10 o'clock. I was excited, and I thought that I was getting the deal of a lifetime. So that night, I left my place a little before 10 and drove out to the address. It was a lot farther away than I expected, probably about 20 minutes. When I got to the neighborhood, it looked pretty sketchy, to be honest. Most of the houses were run down, and the yards were overgrown. I started to get a bad feeling, but I was already there, so I wasn't just going to leave. I found the address and then parked on the side of the road in front of it. I walked up to the house, which did not appear to be in great shape. I texted the owner that I was there and then went up and knocked on the door. After a few moments, I heard somebody walking up to the door and then it opened. There was a guy with long hair and a patchy beard who answered. He said hi and then instantly invited me to come inside. I walked in the house, which looked pretty run down. It almost looked abandoned, to be honest. Almost every light was off, except for this dim one in the other room. The man told me to go into that room, and so I did. This appeared to be a bedroom or an office, but there was no furniture in it except for these 2 old chairs and a folding table. The guy told me to have a seat, and I did in one of the chairs. The man said that he would be right back and go get the laptop. By now, I was completely sketched out by this whole thing. I was kicking myself for even entering the house, but I was hanging on to the hope that I would get a free laptop. Looking back, I should not have even gone to the house. If somebody lived in a place like that, why would they be giving away a free laptop? Well, after the man left the room, I just sat there and waited. But the longer I did, the more nervous I became. Then, suddenly, the door slammed shut to the room that I was in. I could tell that somebody had closed it, and the wind hadn't blown it shut or anything like that. I got up and stood there for a moment. The door did not open. I walked over to it and tried to open it, but it was being held shut. Somebody was on the other side. I was terrified now. I went back inside the room and looked around. I didn't know what to do and I panicked. I felt like somebody might run in and attack me or something. There was this one closet in the corner of the room, so I went inside of it and shut the door. Then I called 911 on my cell phone. I quietly told the dispatcher of my situation and I gave them the address as well. Then I waited. I was expecting at any moment somebody to enter the room that I was in. I hoped that I would be able to hold the closet door shut if they tried to open it or something. But nobody came in the room. Things were just silent. About 10 minutes later, the cops got there. I remember that they came inside of the house and I left the room, finding that the door was no longer being held shut. The police searched the house thoroughly, only to find that nobody was there. They also searched the property and nearby area and came up empty-handed. But they did tell me that the house I was in was abandoned and nobody lived there. So whoever lured me there did not actually live there. I was extremely creeped out. After that, I told the police everything that I could about the situation, and then I went back home. The Craigslist ad had been deleted by then. I also found out that the phone number that I'd been texting with was a burner phone. I don't know why the guy just left, but I'm glad that he did. Maybe he realized I had my phone and I could call the police. I honestly have no idea, but I'm glad that I made it out of there okay, and I haven't been on Craigslist since.
This story takes place way back when I was 8 years old. It was my first time ever going to a Toys R Us store. In the city that I lived with my parents and siblings, there was no Toys R Us. The closest one was probably 40 minutes away. Well, one time, pretty close to my birthday, we went to visit my grandparents who had a house in a different city. They lived not too far away from a Toys R Us store. I remember we were staying at their house for the weekend or something. My grandparents offered to take me to Toys R Us to get me something for my birthday. I was really excited, and it was just me and my grandparents going. When we got there, I walked in the store for the first time, and it was one of the coolest places that I had been to that point. For a kid, it was probably my favorite store that I had ever seen. I walked around with my grandparents, and we got a few things that I wanted. I don't remember everything, but I would say we were inside the store for like maybe 30 minutes. We got my gifts, and my grandparents also got some small things for my siblings as well. Then we left the store. Now, this is when things got strange. After getting back to my grandparents' car, we left. I was sitting in the back seat, and they were in the front. So I was just looking around, and for some reason, I noticed that this car was driving behind us. I was watching it for no particular reason at all. But I happened to notice that this car started driving back with us for basically the entire way. And we had to make quite a few turns. My grandparents were talking to each other, and the radio was also on. I guess they were distracted and just didn't notice. There were kind of a lot of other cars out on the road too, from what I could remember. And the only reason I think I noticed was because I had been watching the car the whole time. It wasn't following super close or anything, but it was definitely following us. I could tell that a man was driving, and he was wearing sunglasses, but beyond that, I couldn't tell many details. I wasn't sure if he knew my grandparents or something. That was pretty unlikely, but as a kid, for some reason, it didn't seem too wild. I did not bother to tell my grandparents, and I'm not really sure why. I guess I was just a shy kid, or I felt it wasn't too big of a deal. I really don't have a great explanation for it looking back. So we finally arrived back to their house. My parents and siblings were already there. When we got back, I remember the car behind us did not pull into the driveway. Instead, it kept going down the street, but pretty slowly. We then parked and all went inside. Not too long after this, I remember being in the living room, which was at the front end of the house. I saw the same car parked just a ways down the road. I didn't think it to be a neighbor for some reason. Well, I saw the man walk out of the car. He started going up my grandparents' driveway. However, he never came up to the front door or anything. He went out of my view, and I wasn't sure as to where he had gone. My dad happened to be sitting nearby, but was not looking out the window. I pointed out the car to him, and we got to talking. I mentioned the guy walking up the driveway, and then my dad went and told my grandparents, who did not know who the car belonged to. I just remember that the police ended up being called, and the man ran away on foot, but I believe he was tracked down. It was crazy. I really don't remember what exactly the guy was doing, or why he followed my grandparents. This happened back in the year 1996. I was 13, and one night I was at home with my older sister, who was 16 at the time. I remember that our parents were gone for the night, so they gave us some money to order a pizza. After our parents left, I went into my room to play video games, and my sister was in her bedroom. When I got hungry, I left my room and I told my sister that I wanted pizza then. So we ordered, and I'm not sure what time it was, but it was dark out. While we waited for the pizza, we hung out in the living room. Then I remembered that the pizza guy got there. After he rang the doorbell, my sister went over and answered and paid the guy. She then brought the pizza into the kitchen. I was still in the living room watching TV, but I was about to go into the kitchen. As I got up, I heard somebody suddenly trying to open the front door to our house. I stopped where I was and listened. They tried opening the door again. I wasn't sure if it was the pizza guy or what. I went over to the front window and looked out of it. I was just on time to barely see somebody moving away. They went out of sight within a second though, and I really didn't see anything. It was just enough to know that somebody was there. The person had gone to the side towards the driveway, but also towards the side of our house. I kept watching, but I did not see them return. I figured they had left, so I then went into the kitchen, and I remembered that I told my sister about it. We looked out of a few windows, but didn't see anything, and figured that the guy had left. So we went into the living room and were having pizza and watching some TV. But not long into this, and then there was a knock at the front door. We carefully went over to a front window and looked out of it. When we did, we saw that there was this guy standing there on the front step. It was not the pizza delivery guy from earlier. Neither of us recognized him, and we figured that it was the same guy who had tried entering the house. We didn't know what we should do. I wanted to call our parents, but they didn't have cell phones at the time. So we stayed in the living room and heard the guy knock once more. Then he stopped. Things were very quiet for a short time. We looked out again, and the guy was now gone and we couldn't see him. However, just moments later, we heard somebody try opening the back door to the house. Whoever this guy was, he seemed to be determined to get into our house for some reason. My sister said she was calling the police and then went over to the home phone. I stayed in the living room and hoped that the man would not try to break in. While my sister was on the phone, I didn't hear anything more. After she was told that the police were on their way, we looked out of a few more windows. We did not see the guy in the backyard or the front yard. Probably 10 minutes later, the police got there. We figured that the guy had left. I remember just hoping that he wouldn't return after the police had went away. My sister mostly talked to the police and said what happened. I also talked to them a little bit too and gave my accounts. They said they would look around our property, and surprisingly,
The police found a man hiding behind a tree in our backyard. It was the same guy. I really couldn't believe that he was still there. The police arrested the guy for trespassing. Neither me or my sister had any idea who he was. I'm really glad that they found him. When I went to college, I lived in the dorms my freshman and sophomore years. I remember that my first year, I got assigned a random roommate. It was a guy named David, who was a little bit weird, but overall we got along fine. He had a very strange sense of humor and said some weird things. We weren't really friends, but we talked sometimes because of being roommates and stuff. Well, I remember a few weeks into the school year, and there were reports on campus of somebody who would dress in all black and do strange things. Sometimes they would chase students, other times there was small vandalism, like the guy would tip over trash cans or write on the wall or stuff. He would cover his face with a ski mask, so nobody had a clue as to who he was. I was hearing about it just like everybody else. A lot of the students were talking about him. Well, one time, someone in my own dorm building left his room, and when he came back, the masked mystery guy was in the room. The mystery guy apparently messed up the room, tossing around all his items and then taking his laptop and running away. I heard about it and I was nervous that I would encounter this mystery guy. To that point, I had never seen him in person. Well, I did the following day. One of my classes ended super early, so I went back to the dorm room. When I got back, nobody was there. However, I remember that not long after I arrived back, suddenly the door unlocked. It then quickly swung open, and I saw the notorious masked man. He took off the mask, revealing that it was my roommate David. Then he saw me and had a surprised look on his face. He asked me why I wasn't in class. I asked him what on earth he was doing. I realized that he was the identity behind the guy. David told me that if I told anyone, he would make me live to regret it. I didn't know how serious of a threat it was, but in the moment, I told him I wouldn't say anything as long as he stopped and gave the stolen laptop back to the kid. I knew that was messed up to take something like that. He said that he would, so we moved on at that point and I soon went to another class. For a few days, I didn't really see David much at all, but I at least didn't hear anything about the masked man on campus. I talked to the kid who had his laptop stolen though, and asked him if he ever got it back or anything, and he said no. At that point, I requested to get a new room. I really didn't want to live with David anymore, and I felt like he was unpredictable. Luckily, my wish was granted. I got assigned a new room the following week, and then I moved out. But David was not happy that I moved out for some reason. I remember that he threatened me again not to tell on him when I left. I told him to give the kid's laptop back or I would tell. Well, a few days later, I heard about another incident regarding the masked man, aka David. At that point, I couldn't hold my tongue any longer. I knew the kid still didn't have his laptop, so I went to the school offices and I told on David. I was not afraid of him doing anything to me because I no longer shared a room with him. Well, the next night, pretty late, I was in my dorm room and somebody tried opening my door. I got up and went to look and saw David standing there on the other side. He then started knocking. I yelled at him to go away, but he didn't. Instead, he kept pounding on my door and trying to open it. Then he started to kick it really hard. I really thought that the door might break from the force. I was getting nervous because I didn't know what David was capable of, and I didn't really have much to defend myself other than my fists. Luckily, David did not get in. The resident assistant heard the loud noise and came to question him. He then took off running. I found out the next day that David had been kicked out of the college. Luckily, the kid got his laptop back. For the rest of the semester, I was afraid that David would come back and try to do something to me. I knew that he hated me for getting him kicked out of the school, but really, he did that to himself. I'm just glad that I haven't seen him since.
I used to work at McDonald's. When I did, I was usually working behind the counter and taking orders. Well, a few months into my time there, and something really strange happened. I was still in high school at the time and living with my parents. The McDonald's that I worked at was only about 5 minutes away. This made it convenient and nice to work there. So one night, things were pretty normal. Like many times, it was quiet when I got to work at the McDonald's in the afternoon. Then, in the early evening, things picked up quite a bit and were pretty busy for a while. When it got to be a little later at night, it quieted down. But during the time that it was still kind of busy, but just starting to quiet down, I was inside taking an order. I remember that a customer was ordering, and during this time I noticed a person entering the McDonald's out of the corner of my eye. But I wasn't really focusing on them, because I was more focused on the customer who was currently ordering. After walking in though, this person started walking over as if they were going to get in line behind the person ordering. I noticed that it was a woman. Instead of getting in line though, she took out her phone and appeared to take a picture of me. It was really obvious. Then, right after doing so, she quickly turned around and walked right out of the restaurant. I must have had a surprised look on my face, because I remember the customer who had been ordering look at me and then turn around to look. By the time she looked though, the woman was walking out of the door. The customer asked what happened, and I told her that the woman had took a picture. At first, I wasn't sure if the woman was directing her picture at me or at the customer. We both thought it was weird, but then the customer finished her order. I was wondering for most of the rest of the shift why that woman took my picture. Maybe I had took her order earlier that day, and she either didn't like me or liked me. But I hadn't remembered seeing her at all, and I thought that I would. I would see so many people, I guess anything was possible. And if I had took her order the previous day, I certainly wouldn't remember. Either way, it was sure weird. So the next time that I worked was a few nights later. It was a very similar shift, and believe it or not, basically the exact same thing happened. Except this time, I was not taking anybody's order. I was just standing behind the counter by myself. Once again, the door opened. The same woman walked in. At first, I recognized her, but I wasn't sure exactly from what. After making her way inside a few steps though, I remembered exactly where I had seen her before. And then, she once again took out her phone and took my picture. This time, I asked her what she was doing, but she did not answer me. Very quickly, she put her phone away, turned around, and walked out. I was once more left very confused. I did not see her for the rest of my shift. I worked a few more times after that, and did not see her or have my picture taken that I was aware of. Then, one day, probably a week or so later, I got home from school. My mom said that there was a letter in the mail for me, and she showed it to me. There was in fact a letter addressed to me at the table, which my parents had got from the mailbox. I opened it up, curious as to who it was from. Inside of the envelope was just 2 photos. When I looked at them, I instantly recognized them. They were the 2 photos that the woman took of me working at McDonald's. There was no letter to go with it or anything, just the photos. There was also no return address on the envelope. It was so weird. I told my parents about it, and the next time that I worked, I told my boss. Everyone was confused and didn't know who would be doing it or why. But after that, I never saw that woman again. There were no more pictures taken of me at work or sent to me. Still, I never found out who did that or why. It's very strange. Last year, I needed to buy a new car. Mine broke down, and I ended up getting rid of it. I borrowed a friend's car for a couple of weeks while I looked for a new one. I wanted to get something used for fairly cheap. I looked multiple places, at dealers, on Craigslist, and Facebook Marketplace as well. I ended up finding a car that I liked the best on Facebook Marketplace of all places. The listing seemed legit, and a price that was really good, but not too good to be true. So I reached out and contacted the seller, a man named Drew. After talking briefly about the car, I said that I would like to look at it. I wanted to take it for a test drive, and then possibly buy it if I liked how it was. Drew said that I could come over and look at it. However, I asked if we could meet in the parking lot of a nearby store. Drew agreed to this, and we decided to meet the following night at 7 p.m. So when the time came, I drove to the store, which had a very large parking lot. The back side of it was almost always empty, and it was when I got there. So after arriving, Drew was already there with the vehicle. There was also another car parked there. It was another guy who I guess must have been Drew's friend. I got out and met them both, and then I looked at the car in person. It seemed good, and I was offered a test drive, to which I agreed. Then I got inside of the car. Drew got in the passenger seat, and his friend got in the back right behind me. I didn't really know why the other guy came with.
but I started up the car and then started to leave the parking lot. My plan was to just drive around the nearby street and then head back to the store. But right as I was leaving the parking lot, Drew said that they knew of a good place to take the test drive. The guy behind me agreed. They said they would direct me on where to go. I didn't think that much of it, but it seemed a little bit odd. So I followed their instructions and I took one road for a short ways before going to another one. Soon I was told to turn again. By now I no longer knew where I was. These roads were more quiet and there was also more woods. Nothing about it other than being quiet made it seem better for a test drive or anything. We were getting farther away and I was just getting a bad feeling about it. Soon I was told to turn again. When I did, this time the road became very narrow. By now, things were quiet and awkward inside the car. I really just wanted to go back to the parking lot and leave. Then the man told me to turn at the next right. I saw the road they were referring to, and it was this really sketchy looking road surrounded by woods. I didn't want to, and I drove right past it. When I did, the men both got upset, telling me to go back, but I didn't. I told them that I could see that the car ran well, and I just wanted to go back to the parking lot now. But instead of saying okay, or they understood, they said no and to go back. They seemed angry with me, but I didn't listen. I just kept driving, going back to the parking lot. For the first few minutes, the guys were both nagging me to go back to that one road, but I was luckily able to drive the rest of the way back without a problem. I got back to my car in the parking lot and parked nearby. Then I got out. Now, right after I got out, without saying anything, Drew moved over to the driver's seat of the car. Then the other guy got out of the back seat and went to his car. Then they both just left. I wasn't asked if I wanted to buy the car or anything. They were just gone. That made me even more suspicious. Why did they want me to drive there? Were they planning to rob me or kidnap me or something? They didn't even seem interested in selling the car. It was really sketchy looking back. I reported what happened and did not end up buying a car on Facebook Marketplace.
I'm a former pizza delivery driver. I got the job when I was 20 years old, and at first, I liked it a lot. I would not have to work that much, just a few nights a week. My car was fairly new, and I didn't mind delivering at all. The area that I live is not super crowded, so the driving is pretty easy on the roads, and I would also make lots of money in tips, so it was well worth it. After I had been working there for about 6 months, I was working one weekend pretty late. It had been a busy night. I remember going on countless deliveries, but making quite a bit of money. It got late and the deliveries slowed down significantly. I was sitting inside of the restaurant when we got another order for me to deliver. By now, it was probably like 1 something in the morning. It was an order of just cheese bread. I took the order, got the address, and then headed out to my car to deliver it. I had been to this area before, but not the exact street or address. The location was about 10 minutes away, and when I arrived, I saw that it appeared to be a pretty typical house. I was on a residential street, and I parked on the side of the road. I walked up to the house with the cheesy bread. When I got to the front door, though, I noticed there was a note taped to it. It said, "Please use back door." When I saw this, I'm not going to lie, I got a little bit of a bad feeling. But I knew that there was probably a logical explanation. Maybe the door didn't work or there was too much junk in front of it. The reason for my bad feeling was probably just because it was so late at night and really dark out. So I walked around the side of the house and then went into the back. I looked around for the back door and then was able to find it. I walked up to it and knocked. Then I waited. For about 30 seconds or so, there was nothing. I was about to knock again, but then I thought I heard some footsteps inside. I waited, and then the door opened up, but I didn't see anybody. It was like whoever opened up the door had stayed behind it and then moved out of the way quickly. Inside of the house, it was completely dark. Not a single light was on. I was very confused. I did not go inside, but kept standing there, and I announced that I was there from the pizza place. I did not get a response at all in return, though. As I waited there by the open door, I was wondering what I should do. The bread was not paid for, so I couldn't just leave. As I continued waiting, a short time later, I thought I heard the sound of the front door to the house open and close. I couldn't be sure though. I asked if anybody was there. I knew that somebody had opened the door for me and seemingly wanted me to go inside, but I certainly was not going to do that. So I just kept standing there. Then I noticed some movement to my right and sort of behind me. I looked, and there was a man standing there. He was at the entrance of the backyard and sort of on the side of the house. But this man was wearing a ski mask over his face. I was really creeped out as soon as I saw him. Then he started to walk towards me. When that happened, I knew that I had to get out of there. I just set the box of bread down and took off running. I went back around the house away from the guy. Then I ran to my car, got inside, and drove away from there. I went back to work, and I told my coworkers all about it. They all found it very amusing and seemed to think that it was funny. However, I was completely terrified. So much so that I only worked there for about another month. Then I quit and I got another job. I still think about that from time to time. Was it some crazy prank, or did the man have bad intentions? I really don't know.
This happened just a couple of years ago. I remember that I was with my girlfriend and we were driving back home from a concert. It was pretty late at night, and the concert was about 2 hours from where we lived. However, we did not want to spend any money on a hotel and knew that we could make the drive, even if it meant staying up really late. I remember that about halfway back, we stopped in a city to get some gas. It was a city that neither of us had really been to before. After fueling my car, I started to drive back onto the road. We were going to go back onto the highway, but before doing so, we noticed this old Toys R Us. It was a crazy sight to see, because neither of us had been to a Toys R Us or even seen one since we were kids. I'm not sure when most of them went out of business, but I know that there were only a few, if any, left around when this story took place. My girlfriend asked me to pull into the parking lot to see if it was still functioning. I'm a pretty spontaneous person, and I was curious too, so I pulled in. It was hard to tell at first, because obviously with it being late at night, the place would be closed anyways. The parking lot was completely empty, and the store was sort of by itself. There were no other stores connected to it, or in the same parking lot or anything. I ended up driving up to a parking space and stopped. My girlfriend then opened up her door and got out. I followed, and we walked up to the front doors to look inside. When we got to the doors, we noticed that the store was abandoned. It probably hadn't been open in at least a year. We looked around and we were kind of exploring a little. Obviously, we couldn't go inside or anything. We were going to head back to the car when we noticed this guy standing by it. I really don't know where he had come from. The man turned and faced us, but did not say anything. I didn't get a real good look at him, but could tell that he had a somewhat long beard. Then the man walked right over to our car and tried opening the driver's door, which was locked. I could not believe his nerve with us right there. I yelled at him that was my car. The man did not answer. Instead, he randomly turned and started running towards us. It was one of the creepiest things I've ever seen. My girlfriend and I both took off running. We ended up sprinting around the side of the Toys R Us building. There was a quiet little road which led to the back, and it just connected to another parking lot. The man did not chase us back there. We waited for a few minutes and then returned to look. By now the guy was walking around the parking lot, but a long distance away. My girlfriend and I decided to make a run for it. We thought that we could make it to the car if he decided to chase us again, and he wasn't really looking in our direction, so we both took off running. About halfway into the sprint, the man noticed us. He started to chase after us again. Fortunately, we were able to make it. We got in, locked the doors, and quickly drove away. The man was not able to catch up to us. Then we continued our drive back home. I'm not sure who the guy was or what he was doing. I would guess that he was probably on drugs. I haven't been back to that area since. This is a crazy experience that I had years ago. I was 16 at the time, and my older brother was 19. I remember that one day he asked me if I would go with him to buy an ATV. I guess he had found one on Facebook Marketplace and was going to go buy it that night. That's really all I knew. My brother had a truck that he could put the ATV in the back of, and I guess the ATV itself was broken or something, but my brother had a friend who could fix it. So anyways, we left our house and my brother drove to the place he was buying it from. The place was a good 20 minutes away from us. We got there after dark, but I guess that was the time they arranged to meet. So the place was a house and it was in this neighborhood that was a little bit out in the country. The houses were real spread out with a lot of land. There were also a good number of trees. At this one house in particular, it had a lot of pine trees all over the yard. We parked across the street, got out, and walked to the house. I remember that after going to the front door and knocking on it, nobody answered. We kept standing there and waiting, but nobody came to the door. After a couple of minutes and several more tries of knocking, we suddenly heard a noise to the left and kind of behind us. After looking, we saw that there was a man standing there. I obviously had no idea if this was the guy selling the ATV or not, but I assumed that it was for a moment. But for some reason, the guy looked angry. My brother turned and said hi to him. But instead of saying hi back to us, the man just started running towards us really aggressively. This was really strange. We both just took off running. The angle the guy was coming at us from was nearly from the street, so we both ran deeper into the yard. We ran through the yard, passing by tons of trees. Eventually, we tried to make it back to the street. It was hard to see because there was no light back there. Soon though, we were able to run around the backyard and eventually go into the direction of the street. We kept running and made it back to the car. When we got inside, we no longer saw the guy chasing after us. At first, we thought that we had lost him, but when we left, we soon saw another car driving behind us. This seemed to be the same guy, because wherever we went, the car went as well. Eventually, my brother went into some random neighborhood and kept making turns left and right. This went on for about 10 minutes or so. Finally, the car stopped following us. We drove the rest of the way back home after that. I had no idea what had happened, but my brother didn't seem to know either. We had no clue who that guy was or why he was chasing us. The seller, I guess, blocked my brother after that. My brother then reported it to Facebook. That was the craziest thing to ever happen to me.